IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. It is Monday. It is recruiting hour time. That is Ryan Roberts, Director of Recruiting at Irish Breakdown. That's Sean Davis, who is a recruiting analyst at Irish Breakdown. And fellas, a lot of recruiting news over the last week. I feel like Notre Dame kind of put all their visits, all their important visits for 2025 kids in about a 10-day period. Just got them all in. You guys broke down the first weekend last week, previewed the upcoming visits. Notre Dame's had a lot of very important kids on campus this past week, and we are going to talk about it all. We're going to recap how the weekend went. We're going to have our confidence pick discussion, and we're going to end things with an interview that Ryan did with a very talented 2026 recruit. So, fellas, lots of jam-packed stuff going on today, man. It is busy time. June is not a time off for people that cover Notre Dame recruiting. There's no doubt about that, fellas.
Well, it's really interesting, too. I know, Sean, that we talked about this, I think, last week or the week before, but Notre Dame packs it into the first 2 weekends, right? They have it 2 weekends ago, the midweek, and then they have this past weekend. And, I mean, we're looking at there's still a big recruiting weekend for other schools that's coming up. So Notre Dame, I think, is – because I think that there's a midweek this week for some schools. They have like the 18th through the 20th, and then they have the 21st through the 23rd is the big recruiting weekend next weekend. But I'll say one thing. Notre Dame didn't have a big board. I think they'll end up with a total of 8 official visitors this month. So it's obviously not a big board because 2025, we know where Notre Dame is with a lot of these guys. They already have 21 recruits in the class. It's a smaller board in general. But also packing it so forward into the month, Notre Dame clearly felt pretty good about where they were with a few of those guys to have the confidence to do that, right? Because for some guys, you could say, why wouldn't you stretch it to the last visit of the month? Why wouldn't you be a little bit more patient? Notre Dame clearly, Sean, feels pretty good about where they are with several of these guys that we've been talking about the last couple of weeks.
And to just piggyback on what you both have said, Notre Dame is figuring it out. And that's what we're watching. We're watching them as a staff figure it out on the recruiting side. And this is the thing. They haven't really figured out the field side yet. They've won 19 games the last 2 seasons. But when I say figure it out, I'm talking about playoff wins, playoff run, national championship. And the way they've turned around recruiting and what we're seeing from the invasion to the official visits, we think the talent has improved at the invasion that shows up. National talent wants to come camp in Notre Dame. And now we're seeing the official visits and everything condensed into bigger weekends, which plays a major part in getting young men closed and in the class and signing in December. These are positive signs. 3 things come with success, gentlemen, that you cannot avoid. 3 things: great things, hard things, and little things. And Notre Dame is figuring how to handle all of those things to create a successful brand of recruiting at Notre Dame. And that's what we're witnessing, the process of that taking place. You have to tip your cap. And then we'll see in December whether or not things can get better. But they've already started on the 26 class. They got 27 kids coming in. It just shows the maturation of Marcus Freeman and his entire staff and how they built this program without having a championship. They have truly turned the tide of the view of Notre Dame on the national recruiting landscape. And it's absolutely fantastic to watch.
Very well said, Sean. It's almost like you speak for a living, my friend. It's almost like you speak for a living.
We'll get into the specifics of the guys who are on campus a little bit here, Sean. But it's you know that what you're saying is true, Sean. And you and I have talked about this. Ryan and I have talked about this. You and Ryan have talked about this since Marcus Freeman was hired. Don't let this man win because it's going to be a problem. But you're starting to hear that now from national people as well. JD, what did you say? Is it Piquel? JD Piquel from On3. I've only listened to him 4 or 5 times. It's pretty good.
I like him.
Pretty fair guy, pretty smart guy, pretty fair. But he was saying the same thing. He's like, look, if Marcus Freeman, if they make a playoff run this year, watch out for Notre Dame. And I'm like, well, that you should already be watching now. They're already doing what they need to do. And this last week was an opportunity to do that, fellas, because at the end, it's that chicken and egg argument that people have. It's no different than recruiting. Well, you got to win to recruit at a high level, but you got to recruit at a high level to win at a high level. And that's the thing is Marcus Freeman has really upped the recruiting game. And we see that with the freshman and sophomore classes. We look at the talent that's on that group with that group of players. And then we see this 2025 class has a chance to be every bit as good as those previous 2 classes. It'll be better than those classes in some areas, maybe not quite in some other areas, but on the whole, it's an opportunity if they close well to really stack 3 fantastic classes in a row. So let's talk about what it's going to take to stack those fellas. And Ryan, it really gets down to this official visit period. I know you guys have talked about this, but this official visit period was vitally important. It was make or break for Notre Dame in reality. I think on the whole, we'll kind of wrap it up big picture, Ryan, and then we'll dive into specifics. On the whole, I feel like Notre Dame, with the intel and the feedback that we've gotten, you've gotten from your sources, I've gotten from my sources, and you and I kind of talking about this, I don't know. They're not going to get all the kids that visited. There's going to be, maybe a kid or two, maybe that they want that they're not going to get. But I can't envision it going any better than it has over the last week, week and a half. And a big part of that reason why, Ryan, is because the visit was so small. Because last weekend they could have Madden Faramo, for those who I've been screwing his name up. I told you I didn't know his name, but I got it right. Madden Faramo, Nathaniel Wusu-Boateng, and Jameer Joseph. Middle of the week, you had Jaydon Blair, you had John Anthony Hall, Dylan Robinson in this past week, and obviously Derek Meadows and Tanook Hines. And then each time they were on campus, there was twice as many commits on the 2 weekends as there was the individual players. So this is one of those areas where being so full so quickly has put Notre Dame in position to potentially close better because they're not spread so thin with the staff. I mean, you're averaging like 3 coaches per kid on a visit, Ryan. That has put them in a great position to put their best foot forward with all these kids. And there's some kids now that Notre Dame going into the visits was definitely not the leader for, that we feel coming out, whether they'll get them or not, at least as of today, they're now the leader for as we start getting into decision-making mode.
Well, I feel like every year you hear about, for the most part, it's the usual cliches of like, the visit went great, and I love Notre Dame, and Notre Dame's cool, and they'll be in it until the end, and all those cliches that we hear from almost every single recruit that does take an official visit. But every year, Sean, and we've talked about this over the last couple of years, every year, though, there's a couple kids where, for whatever reason, the visit went sideways, right? Where you just come out and it's like, that's a weird vibe coming out of there. And then you hear a little bit of the backstories of like what happened, if there was just kind of a difference of opinion, or if there was a different vision, or maybe there wasn't a spot for them, like all these miscellaneous things that kind of happen down the stretch. I mean, we've seen that over the last couple of years. So it is very unique. One, as a Notre Dame, covering Notre Dame recruiting, we know that Notre Dame fills up very early. So that we're working with a very small list. But I think that individualized attention, for one, is paramount, because there are several of these kids, like, we'll talk about a couple of these kids where I don't really think it matters whether it's a more intimate conversation or if it's a big group. I think that they can do well in either one. But for a couple of these kids, that 100% matters. And I think that individualized attention is big for a few of these recruits that we'll talk about. But I think overall, of the 8 kids that have visited this month, there is not a single recruit that you feel like you are stagnated, or you didn't make progress with, or you didn't take the lead for, or you didn't expand the lead for. You are trending in an upward direction with each and every one of those kids. So first and foremost, shout out to the Notre Dame staff for that. Shout out to the recruiting staff for that. Shout out to Chad Bowden for that. Shout out to everyone that's involved in these official visits, because, guys, I'll tell you, I mean, I know what I saw, like Carter Allman, who is a recruiting, in the recruiting department for Notre Dame. I woke up to him on Friday because they were able to call the 2026 kids at midnight that night, where they didn't sleep all night. I mean, let's be honest, and that was during an official visit weekend. So as if they're not busy enough. So shout out to those guys putting on these types of performances and to trend with these types of kids, because certainly they did not hurt themselves this month.
For you to point that out, that's something else that you can bring up as well, how impressive it is for them to be at the place they are in the recruiting landscape, because they stepped into a recruiting landscape and a college football landscape that was in the midst of transition. The business of football was changing, which means the recruiting of football changes. This is the landscape that Marcus Freeman stepped into as the head coach, first-time head coach at Notre Dame. And so customization, I think, is something they realize. They're not going to recruit like Alabama and Georgia and just mass recruit on the back end and mass close on the back end. They can't slow walk top kids like that. They have to jump out front. They understand that. But the customization of recruiting weekends is vitally important, right? It's just like teaching. You've been a teacher, Ryan, before. You know, the smaller the classroom, the more attention to detail you can give to the students. And Bryan pointed that out. Now you have smaller groups coming in. That's more detailed, customized visits that you can put upon these young men to make them feel. And this is something that we're going to have up on the board a little bit later, and talking to some of the 26 kids on that first day that they received calls. I talked to multiple guys in the Chicagoland area, and they were frank. The schools that make me feel like a top priority, they're going to get my best. Right. They're going to get my attention. And so that, I think that matters in the official visit. Bryan, we talked about it last week a little bit, man. Recruiting is so diverse now. You don't know what you're going to get from kids, what type of kid this kid is. Is he an NIL first kid? Is he an academic first kid? Is his family this type of family? Everything's diverse. And so these coaching staffs have to figure this out. They have to read tea leaves, and they try to customize these visits, unofficial or official, to the best of their capabilities to make maximum impact. So this is the game now in college football.
Let me say this real quick, Ryan, because this is a frustrating part of recruiting because for Notre Dame for so long, because Notre Dame was often not one of those first groups on the board, right? I mean, they were not one of those schools that were dogged, Ryan. They right, to your point, you're talking about what Carter and those guys did. Trust me, you know, you were long hours asleep when I was still on the phone texting about those 26 kids. I mean, it's like, and they're doing that right in the middle of an official visit period, which is dumb by the NCAA. But, you know, to Sean's point, Ryan, of course kids, especially top kids, are going to go somewhere they feel like a priority. Why would you not? Right. Like, if I just was like, hey, you know, hey, we like you, whatever, and you know, fine, if you want to come here, whatever. I mean, you're not going to go there. You want to know that you're a priority. But part of being showing that you're a priority, Ryan, is the work and grinding in the work. And that's what got us here, because the kids that are visiting now are kids, Ryan, that were guys that you were writing about after last year's pot of gold. You know, when they first started contacting 25 kids, who were the guys that they were reaching out to? It was a lot of these guys that are either in the class or they're trying to close on. And you're not going to have a shot with Madden Faremo and Nathaniel Owusu Boateng and guys like that if you weren't first on the board. You're not going to – part of the reason Notre Dame is even in it with Derek Meadows is because they got on him so much earlier than all the other big schools. Right. And I think that's a big change from where they're at. And then when you come into these weekends, Ryan, and they are putting an emphasis on combining – see, what I think this group does a great job of, Ryan, and it's really become evident this recruiting cycle because they're up in their game every year. It's that and you talk to these guys, Ryan, and you can speak to this. They're combining the quote-unquote cool factor. You know, like you get Derek Meadows doing the photo shoot with people cheering, we want Meadows, you know, that kind of thing, with also making sure it's not just about the glitz and glamour. There are very real conversations happening about what Notre Dame is trying to build, and I think that's what makes Notre Dame unique is, yeah, they're doing the glitz and the glamour. They're not opposed to that, but it's got to be about substance. That's all fun, but it's got to be about substance, and I think they're doing a really nice job of combining those two things with a lot of these kids, Ryan.
Well, I think everything they do is built off of relationships and authenticity. I mean, we're not seeing head coaches grinding on dudes, right? Like that's not the message that they're trying to get across. Everything they do, even if it's chanting a kid's name or doing the player walk out of the tunnel and those types of things, it's all built off of the camaraderie and the relationships that they have built with the other recruits on campus, the other targets on campus, and the coaches on campus ultimately. And I was just going to add is that, and it is part of this, is that these big visits are also huge for the parents. And we don't talk about that enough, right? Because some of these unofficial visits that these kids take, they'll take with coaches, they'll take with teammates, they'll go by themselves even at times. Like they make those types of trips without parents occasionally. Now, there are a lot of recruits that do visit with parents ultimately, but these official visitor weekends are to get the entirety of a family. You know, maybe dad only takes me on unofficial visits, but dad and mom are both going to be there. Maybe I have a sister or a brother that also want to come and be a part of the festivities and part of this situation. So I think also these visits can sell and finalize thoughts for parents, right? Like, because they have a say in this thing ultimately. Like, yeah, this might be Johnny's decision when it's all said and done, but like I have to be okay with Johnny's decision. I'm not just going to sign off on Johnny making a really stupid decision for himself. I still have to be comfortable with where they're going ultimately. And I think that overall that's where you win out this weekend. It's not just with the players. It's not just with the other recruits that are around them. it's with the parents ultimately, because again, that's why I'm getting a parent that's going to come on soon to the podcast. I'm scheduling it out right now because I want her to talk about what an official visit looks like for her parents, right? Like, what does that look like? Who are they hanging out? Who are they talking to? Who are they interacting with on a day-to-day basis? Because we often use the fact that this is about not only winning over a player and a recruit, but also winning over a support system, which is very important as well.
We'll have an intel piece coming up later, Ryan, where that's going to be part of it on the message board, and we'll talk about the specific player on the intel piece. We won't necessarily dive as far into it in this particular show, but there's one player in particular that I don't think Notre Dame was the leader for, that I believe now they feel that they're the leader for, and a lot of it was because of not only the impression they made on him, but the fact that they knew that they had to win the parents over on this trip as well, and so there's a concerted effort. But again, you have 3 kids on campus. At most, you're going to have 6 parents, maybe a grandpa or a step parent, what I mean? So you could have, but again, that's a small group of people. You're going to have a coach per person in that situation when you've got 8, 9, 10 kids on an official visit. Because remember the first year you did this, Ryan, and we had those official visit weekends, and Notre Dame had like 10, 12 uncommitted kids on campus because they were trying to finish the class out. And that's a lot harder. And then, last year was like 6 or 7 per weekend. Well, this year it's 2, 3. It's like, and that's huge. And I think that's also what that midweek visit thing does. Now, I think that was also partly out of Notre Dame not wanting to, like, there's 2 ways you can look at recruiting. You can say, hey, let's be first and make that strong impression that everybody has to live up to. Let's be last so we get the last chance at it. I think in this particular year, what's interesting for Notre Dame is they weren't overly concerned about being last. They wanted to be early. They wanted to get Dylan Robinson early, Jaydon Blair early. So they were willing to go midweek in order to make that happen because they felt like, hey, we're going to set a standard that they all have to match. And instead of saying, hey, let's find out how these other visits go, and then we can figure out what we need to do to overcome them, they were saying, hey, we're going to set the bar. And I think that aggressiveness is also something that is important. And this goes back to conversation, Sean, you and I had 2 years ago about Marcus Freeman's not asking permission to be part of the old boys club. He's making himself part of it. He's walking in there and saying, hey, we as a staff, we are going to be the trendsetters. We are going to be that team that says we're not afraid of anybody. We'll take anybody on at any place and time for any recruit. And they're no longer battling schools that they used to battle for kids. It's now we're battling, looking at from the coach standpoint, Bama, Georgia, Ohio State, Texas, and that's a big thing. And you're going to lose more of those kids, but boy, they got a shot to really do some things. We'll wrap up this intro section, fellas. Ask folks to do us a favor, hit that like button before we move on to this next section. Hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast, give us a 5-star review, and if you are not signed up for the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com, you are missing out. Ryan's had a ton of intel over the last week. And, normally we kind of do combo intel features, where I'll get some, Ryan will get some, we'll put them together and do like one thing. And I'm like, all right, Ryan's just pumping out intel. I can go over here and work on some other things. So he's done a great job this last week, and we'll have more coming out here later today as well. So you're going to want to check that out at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So let's dive into the specifics of the week, of this past week, guys. So we're going to dive into not just this past weekend, but since you guys had your last recruiting hour, Notre Dame has hosted a midweek visitors and then a weekend visitor. So we'll talk about all of them. And Ryan, we'll start things off with, let's go with the midweek visitor. So the position that I would say is most important to close on, in my opinion, there's 2 now. There was 1, but now there's 2 because now safety becomes far more important with what's going on there. But the other one's receiver. Notre Dame has 2 receivers committed right now in Elijah Burris and Jerome Bettis Jr. We believe they're going to take at least 2 more, potentially 3 more. And there's basically 4 guys on the board. And over the last week, all 4 of those guys visited. Well, 2 of them came on campus starting on Tuesday, Ryan, and stayed for 3 days, and things went incredibly well. Let's start off with Dylan Robinson from Bonita High School out in California, Ryan, a guy that has flown under the radar as a recruit, but also as sort of the Notre Dame interest. I feel like he's not getting a ton of buzz because he kind of was a late offer and everybody's been kind of focused on some other guys. But this is a guy that Notre Dame has made up a lot of ground with in a very short period of time, Ryan. and this visit weekend was going to be huge. So what's the latest? What did you hear? Obviously, if you're on the board, you got his intel piece on this, but let's kind of discuss, what kind of move Notre Dame was able to make with Dylan Robinson.
Yeah, I mean, Sean, we've been talking about this one. It's been kind of a weird recruitment for Dylan Robinson, just in the simple fact of he's 6'2", 190 pounds. He reports a 4.4, high 4.4 in the 40, like 4.47 to 4.49, somewhere in that ballpark. He's ran that apparently a couple times over the last year or so at camps. And he's a star, not only a wide receiver, but he also plays cornerback. He can project the safety. He can project all over the place, which is a very interesting conversation. Obviously, Notre Dame sees him on the offensive side of the football. From this past week visits, the 2.5 days that he spent there, basically where we were going in was Notre Dame was in a good spot going into this, in the simple fact of the family values that the Robinsons bring to the table, I think, are very important to both Dylan and everyone around him, his support system that we talk about. High academic kid, spiritual. Really, like, one of the big things that he's trying to find in a school, in a program, is obviously the development on the field, but he's also trying to find development as a person and as a student. Like, he wants all around development, which is what he's talked about. And I think going into that visit, you felt good about Notre Dame with Dylan Robinson, where things were trending, because on paper, bring all the values that the kid's looking for. Like, every single part of what they're looking for, they bring to the table. Now, getting him on campus, though, you see it now, right? Like, you were around Deuce Knight, who came in a couple days early for his official visits, obviously coming this past weekend, got to talk with him, got to see him. You also got to be around the coaches and the players on the team. But I think that the real thing is that talking to admissions and the advisors and everything that goes around being a student athlete at the University of Notre Dame. You also got to sit down, and he talked about being able to sit down with the offensive coaching staff, Mike Brown and Mike Denbrock, and they showed him, how do I fit in this offense? Like, where do you see me? And they see him as a downfield threat, a guy that could win outside the numbers with that size, length, and athleticism combination. And certainly a type of receiver that Notre Dame needs more and more of as they get deeper into the Marcus Freeman tenure. So I think actualizing everything that he was hearing from Notre Dame in person was massive for Dylan Robinson. And I said this coming out of it. He was supposed to have a visit to Kansas this past weekend. I'm actually trying to figure out even if he took that visit, because I haven't seen anything about that out there, but I'll have more on that later potentially. But the last big hurdle now coming out of that visit is UCLA is next weekend. And I would say that out of the schools that he's taking official visits to, UCLA is probably the biggest threat right now, because they are the California pipe, they're the California team. They're a school that he obviously has been on him a lot longer than Notre Dame has. It's the hometown feel type of thing, right? But I think when you kind of look at where he's been linked to, Washington, Kansas, Notre Dame, like, clearly staying at home is not the number one priority for Dylan Robinson. So I think Notre Dame, coming out of this visit, they've separated themselves. Like, if you told me today who is the leader for Dylan Robinson, I would say it's pretty firmly Notre Dame right now, if he's the guy that they want and the guy they're patient for, because the minute that he finishes the UCLA visit, he told me decision-making time. Like, yeah, I'm done. I want to be done this process. I would expect maybe sometime in July, there will be a decision that would be firmly on the table. And I think Notre Dame has positioned himself to be the absolute leader for Dylan Robinson in the end.
Hey, Sean, obviously California doesn't produce quite as many guys for Notre Dame as it used to. I think the staff has made a concerted effort the last couple of years of kind of getting back to getting more impact players from the area. And I think this is the kind of kid that would be some of that. He's from a very good program. Obviously, Noah McHale's a teammate of his as well. Notre Dame needs to be able to still have a foothold in California. And there's two kids, obviously, on the board left that are from California kids. I think this would not only, if they're able to close on him, which Ryan talked about, it's not only important at the receiver position, Sean, but I think it also is just going to be another sort of notch in the belt to say, hey, we got to make sure we're maintaining that foothold in the state of California.
Yeah, and I think, going to your point, I love Notre Dame in the way this staff under Marcus Freeman approaches recruiting and have done so. And the one thing we hear is truth, integrity. Parents love what they present, what they see. And when you get that, I feel like at a place like Notre Dame, you kind of smoke out the posers. And we don't even have to go into that. I think we've had multiple young men kind of be shown up and exposed as posers or guys that just want to use Notre Dame as a holding spot. And when you operate the way Notre Dame operates, you smoke those guys out. Because ultimately, you don't want those type of guys in your recruiting classes. And Dylan Robinson doesn't represent that. I believe that's why he got to campus and he started to fall in love. Even though it was quick, and you just mentioned his top 2 programs, both of those are programs for different reasons that bring something new and fresh to his recruiting. I mean, Deshaun Foster is fresh. He's trying to build UCLA back up to what it was when he was there with Cade McNown. But, you know, that's an offer, like you said, is local, but the staff is pretty fresh. Some of the staff are some guys that he's familiar with, and that's a connection. But there's another connection to the values that represent Dylan Robinson and what he's looking for that is representative of what Notre Dame has to offer. So you talk about 2 things in his recruitment that he loves, both sides, and it's going to be someone that's fresh and new outside of the fact that UCLA has been on him a little bit longer. It's going to be fresh and new staffs really coming out at him. And I want to point this out and allow you guys to jump in on it. I don't think people realize the transition, because transition is tough just in general in life. All of us have been through it. Some of us might be going through it in different areas in life. But when you're in transition, everything is new, it's unknown, there are variables. It can be a little scary. From a recruiting standpoint, look, they lose the safety coach. Transition. Mike Mickens is now over the entire defensive backfield, right? We believe that's a positive in recruiting. Some might believe that. It's even a positive in coaching. That's debatable. We go to the offensive side of the ball. You can say what you want to say. You have Deuce Knight, but then you have a new offensive coordinator coming in, and that's a transition. Then you have a new wide receiver coach coming in, and that's another transition. So I don't know if people realize what they've been able to do with this class, keeping things intact with multiple transitions happening. And then those coaches were able, I think it really is what they've laid as a groundwork and foundation under Marcus Freeman in the recruiting world that's helped even during times of transition, that these coaches have been able to come in, hit the ground running, build relationships. And the wide receiver position is a position that a lot of people in the chat even talked about, maybe lagging behind a little bit. But I think Mike Brown has shown himself worthy of keeping up a little bit. Even when we look at the evaluation, some early evaluations, we might have felt like, now we see the evaluation of a Tanuk Hines later on, the evaluation of a Dylan Robinson later on, and Notre Dame being right there with Meadows, right? Because they could have fallen off. And Ryan, maybe you got a couple of vibes a little bit ago that, man, they might be falling behind a little bit. But Mike Brown has proven himself that, hey, I can keep up with Marcus Freeman. I can keep up with the other guys that are doing a great job. And I like seeing that, even though they might not end up with all the guys at that position, the vibe that's being built collectively as a staff and the way they approach things as a staff, like no one is really left out on an island, when it comes to recruiting at Notre Dame. I love it. I absolutely love it. And I think they made a great impression on Dylan Robinson a long time ago. And then they raised the ante this weekend. So I'm right there with you, Double R. I love where they sit.
Well, one thing that's obviously there's been a lot of transition underneath the boss man and the GM, but that's continuity. It allows it all to work.
Yeah.
Okay, here's the standard, right? The standard is the standard. You're here now. You got to do it. The other thing too is when you look at it, one thing that's I think helped Notre Dame a little bit this offseason is Notre Dame's not even close to the only program going through a major transition. I mean, the defending champs are, the defending national runners-up are. One of the other teams, Bama, that's in the national championship in the fall. I mean, 3 of the 4 teams that are in the college football playoff last year have brand new head coaches. Notre Dame still has that. Ohio State's going through a big change. There's a lot of programs. USC overhauled their entire defensive staff. UCLA has a brand new head coach. So this has been an incredibly busy offseason from that standpoint. And so that certainly Notre Dame has helped that. Ryan, also, we talked about the importance of going out to California to get a kid, but also, Ryan, when you have really good players in your state, you need to be able to make a strong impression there. Another guy that Notre Dame got in on a lot later is John Anthony Hall. Very talented player, had over 1,000 yards last year at Fishers High School. He visited this past weekend as well, Ryan, and Notre Dame is, again, the theme with the first 2 kids. Get in late. You got to make up a lot of ground in a hurry.
Right.
And it sounds like they did just that, Ryan, during his midweek visit as well.
Yep. Yeah, it was a big one for John Anthony Hall out of Fishers. So he's a really interesting kid. Me and Sean obviously interviewed him before that visit, Sean. And I mean, whether he ends up with Notre Dame or not, he is a Notre Dame kid, like first and foremost, right? I mean, he's a 3.8 GPA kid. He's a kid that also, he identifies with his Indiana roots, even though he's kind of been all over the place a little bit, right? And 3-sport star for Fishers, a kid that's a 23+ foot long jumper, which is a very good number for a high school junior. He's also a dang good basketball player for Fishers as well. Seems like, and Sean, you would know a little bit more than me probably, but Fisher seems like they have a pretty good basketball program, kind of an ascending one, if nothing else, right? So John Anthony Hall, very interesting talent, and he's ranked very high. I know 247 Sports has him ranked as the number 52 overall player. There's another that has him in the 200s, and then two others that have him as a 3-star. We've talked about he's probably somewhere in between the 200 something ranking and the 52 ranking, right? He's probably closer to 150 than he is a 52 player, but regardless, very talented. A kid that didn't really take football that seriously his first 2 years. Then he got his first offer from, what was it, Akron, right? And then he was kind of like, oh, I can actually maybe be something in football. And then he has the 69 receptions for over 1,000 yards last year and really had a breakout year for Fishers. Extremely interesting player because he has a offer extended to him on May 31st, and he's on campus less than 2 weeks after that, right? So obviously Notre Dame is a brand that he understands as an in-state kid, and he got to campus and got to spend a lot of time with Deuce Knight, as I talked about with Dylan Robinson as well. I'll phrase it quite simply like this. I think that Notre Dame should be viewed as the very firm, I'll say, they are a team that will be the leader for John Anthony Hall down the stretch if they choose that that's a player that they want in this class, right? That's what it's all going to come down to is there's 4 guys on the board. There's potentially 3 spots available, right? So that does mean that there's one guy that could be, quote unquote, the odd man out or not a part of the class ultimately. If Notre Dame has that 3rd spot or has a spot for John Anthony Hall and he's a guy they want, I think that they would have a very good chance at John Anthony Hall. And a big part of that is obviously being able to develop that relationship in person last week.
That's a big thing, Ryan, is there's 4 receivers on the board. I mean, we'll see if Malik Clark visits or not. He's highly unlikely to be a guy that's going to end up at Notre Dame. Of the 4 kids, they're not going to take all 4. They can't take all 4. They don't have room. So somebody's going to have to kind of not be there. Is it someone who's not there by choice, or does the staff have to make a choice? That's going to be an interesting thing. And I think there's a greater chance that the staff may be forced into that situation now based on how this past week go. We'll see. I mean, there's a lot of kids that have visits left. I know John Anthony Hall has a couple of visits left. Dylan Robinson has the big visit left, obviously. I think Tanuk is done. I think.
Tanuk has Baylor
more
next weekend.
Baylor
next
weekend. Not worried
Yep.
about Baylor. The USC and Texas is done. Okay. I'm more worried about UCLA with Dylan Robinson than I am Baylor with Tanuk Hines. Maybe that's wrong of me, but I'm just not concerned about it. But,
man, they're gonna be showing highlights of KJ Wright all day, man. I don't know what you're talking about.
Real quick, who on this staff was here for that? None of you? Okay, thanks, guys. I'm gonna commit.
He doesn't have to know that. He doesn't have to know that.
But obviously receivers a big one, Ryan, but it wasn't just receivers. There was only receivers on campus this weekend as far as the non-committed kids, but during the middle of the week, there was a non-receiver on campus that is a very, very, very important recruit for Notre Dame, very well known amongst Notre Dame fans and especially Irish Breakdown fans, and that's Jaydon Blair. Obviously this was Notre Dame's chance to kind of seal the deal, finalize it as much as they could. There's still work to be done. He's got visits coming up, but sounds like Notre Dame did a phenomenal job on that one, Ryan.
Yeah, it was expected, obviously. So Jaydon just obviously spent some time in Michigan. He's got Florida State left, and he's got Penn State left. And Penn State's kind of viewed as one of the biggest contenders for Jaydon potentially. I'll say it like this. Things have been trending in Notre Dame's direction with Jaydon Blair for a long time. Obviously, we're talking about a 6'4" plus 190-pound safety who I actually just had a conversation with his head coach over at Mount Tabor, and I'll have a little bit of an interview on that, just kind of talking about what he brings to the field. But this is a young man that whether he is playing from depth, playing in the box, coming down the slot against bigger bodies, I mean, his kid can do a little bit of everything. He even plays wide receiver for Mount Tabor. He's pretty good on the offensive side of football. Former quarterback as well. They actually thought he was going to be a quarterback early in his Mount Tabor career, but ends up being a defensive stalwart for them. And I'll say this. Notre Dame has been high on Jaydon for a long time. Jaydon has reciprocated that interest for the last several months. They've been a main contender for him. I know that the family is also very Notre Dame advocate. Like they definitely like Notre Dame as well, which I think is big for him. At the end of the day, Notre Dame has done everything right in this recruitment, in my opinion, up until this point. They've been patient. They have also been continuous and consistent throughout. I mean, when I talked to him before his visit to Notre Dame, he had talked about he was hearing from at least one staff member, at least one, every single day. So the consistency is there. The effort is there. There was a little bit of uneasiness when Chris O'Leary left for the Chargers, and you were just kind of like, it's a little bit of a tough spot here. But then Mike Mickens comes in, and I mean, there are some, at least a source that I've talked to, that think that Mike Mickens has not only picked up where things left off, but like he might even have a better bond than what Coach O'Leary had with Jaydon. Like it's possible there, right? So they were able to pick up where Chris O'Leary left off and just continue moving forward here. They are the favorite down the stretch as long as you're able to outlast what Michigan did this past weekend, what Penn State's going to be able to show him at the end of the month, or the next weekend, I should say. I think that Notre Dame has a very good chance of solidifying things with Jaydon heading towards his July 5th commitment date, which is his 17th birthday, which is still absolutely wild to say with what he put on film as a junior. But it's been the family aspect. It's been the relationship aspect. Every time Jaydon comes up to Notre Dame, which I think is 3 visits now over the past 6 months or something like that, they have just been able to show him that this is a place that he can be great. And that greatness continued, obviously, this past week.
Ryan, real quick. So he went to Michigan this past weekend, and I
Yes.
believe he has Penn State coming up this final weekend.
He's got Florida State 18th
Florida
to the
State.
20th, and then 21st to the 23rd, which is next weekend with Penn State.
Penn State. Okay, so that's his final 3. He's been to South Carolina, he's been to Notre Dame, he's been to Michigan, and then he's going to take those last 2. So obviously it's going to be about closing time. Sean, I mean, this is a unique kid. You know, I heard somebody sent me a post about somebody that covers another team crying about, well, Notre Dame can't sell Kyle Hamilton forever. And it's like, well, maybe not, but they're certainly doing it now. And I really hate lazy comps. I do. And I think that a lot of lazy comps are made to other players, but this is one where it's like, you see it and you're like, yeah, I get it. Like it fits. It fits. The Kyle Hamilton thing fits. And that's where Notre Dame's success recruiting that position has been important for Notre Dame in the last few years, because they at least have something on the field to sell. You and I talk about it all the time. Got to have something to sell. Well, Xavier Watts, Kyle Hamilton, Harrison Smith, Alohi Gilman, they can sell that now. And a lot of people can't say, well, how are you going to fit a 6'4" kid into your defense? Well, Notre Dame say, we know how, and Marcus Freeman can pop in film of what he did in 2021 and do it.
You talk about sell. You can sell all you want. If the kids don't see it, they don't buy into it, doesn't make a difference. For that person that says they can't sell Kyle Hamilton, well, Ryan, I don't know the early projections, but I see a top 50 draft pick as safety next year, shaking the commissioner's hand, playing in the secondary for Notre Dame this year. Didn't he just win the Bronco Nagurski Award last year? Yeah, maybe seeing him on the field will probably help with that position. But the prototype is Kyle Hamilton for Jaydon Blair, and I think his recruitment has been one of the most pleasurable recruitments, right? Because we sit here and we try to figure out kids doing this and what does this mean, or this kid said this, did this action add up to that? And as things have played out, Jaydon and his father have been pretty honest
and consistent.
Yeah. And and I know it's our job to not kind of fall for the banana in the tailpipe every now and then and try to read things, but as things have played out, it's like, what, they have said what they meant and meant everything that they've said. So, you let it play out and you feel really good about where they sit. Notre Dame, speaking of, when it comes to this young man and his parents, you talk about how important it is for parents. Notre Dame rarely loses the parent recruiting. It's very rare that the parents of top talented kids don't love Notre Dame. But Notre Dame has done this that they haven't been able to do in previous years with top talent at every position. There's 3 things that kids have to see. They have to see the ability to be a top draft pick. They have to see the ability to win a national championship. And Notre Dame can always show kids that you're going to get a quality education. Sure. Notre Dame hasn't been able to show all 3 and make kids really believe and see it. to see it. It's one thing to say you're going to win. We can win a championship. Top kids sit back and they look at Georgia and they look at Alabama and they look at other schools and they say, man, do I really have a chance to win a national championship here? But somehow, some way, this staff is getting top talented kids to say, I can actually see. Deuce Knight actually can see himself winning. I believe CJ Carr actually saw himself winning a national championship. I don't know if that can be said in previous years leading up to Marcus Freeman. So I think the three key things to getting top talent, I don't believe I just opened that door, but I already know where Bryan
I'm not even going to say it, man. I'm not going to even say that when a head coach doesn't think you can win, how can recruits think you can win? So I'm not even going to go there. I'm just going to kick it over to Ryan because I want to ask Ryan this. I want Ryan to speak on this. I'm being a good boy today, Sean. I am. It's twice you tried to team me up. It's twice. And I'm passing on both of them.
I just want to say, this has been one of the most pleasurable recruits and families to really cover in the end because, it has been nothing but honesty and transparency.
Ryan, I want to ask you this question, or I want to kick this topic over to you. For a while, we have told people that Jaydon was a guy that Notre Dame wanted. Not so much that they needed him from a number standpoint. They wanted him because they need impact players. That's why you recruit him. Like, you're not trying to land Nathaniel Wusu-Boateng and Madden Faremo because you need two linebackers, but because you need elite players, and they're elite players. Right. With what's going on with Ivan Taylor, I think that changes the narrative about the Jaydon Blair recruitment a little bit because this now is a big one now. It's not only impact player, Ryan, but if for somehow you lose this one, you're now looking at a potential best safety class in 20 years. And then if they lose this one, it's like, okay, now you're starting over from scratch, essentially, with Ethan Long and then whatever comes next. So with the stuff going on with Ivan Taylor, that security of, well, at least you have those two is gone. Now Jaydon becomes an absolute must get. Now maybe Ivan gets back in the fold. We'll discuss that here in a little bit. But right now, with the way things are trending, this makes the Jaydon Blair recruitment even more important. And it's now not just about we need, as looking at it from the Notre Dame coaching standpoint, hey, we need to go out and get this elite player because we want to add more elite players. Now it's, dude, we got to meet our needs from a number standpoint now, and we may not be able to do that if we don't land this one. And that, I think, has changed very, very quickly, has sort of changed the narrative a little bit around the Jaydon Blair recruitment as well.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt about it. And I would even take it a step further because not only you're just talking about the raw numbers, but I do think that when we're talking about 2025 recruits, there are going to be a lot of conversations about who could come in for the 2025 season and create an impact too, right? Because after this year, Xavier Watts is gone, right? After this year, Rod Hurd is gone, that's potentially your two starting safeties, maybe, right? And at least one, obviously, as an All-American coming back, but that might be your two starting safeties this year, potentially. And with that in the conversation, now you're talking about Adon, year 3, cool. Ben Minnick, year 3, we'll see. Luke Talich, year 3, cool. Like, trending upward. And then Bronte Johnson and Tabron and all those guys. So the cupboard isn't bare necessarily, but there might possibly be, depending on what type of breakout an Adon Schuler has this year, there's going to be a question of like, who's ready to take that next step. And I like Ethan Long a lot. I think Ethan Long is actually going to end up being a very good player for Notre Dame, but will it happen in 2025? I'm not sure about that. I think that Jaydon Blair is a much easier bet I can find a role for that 6'4", 290 plus pound safety year one. Like, I can find it, whether it's just, not just because the kid was a freshman All-American, but whether it's a Kyle Hamilton third safety role where now you're running a little more 3 safety sets and just trying to get him onto the field at some capacity, Jaydon Blair not only fits the numbers need, but also he could be a kid that in 2025 could figure into a rotation, which I think is a big thing that you need in this class as well.
Well, to your point, Ryan, Kyle Hamilton was a 2-year starter in Notre Dame. That's it. Yep. I mean, he was a sophomore, junior starter, but he played a bunch as a freshman as part of that rotation with not only in the 3-man looks with Jalen Elliott and Lohi Gilman, but then also would rotate in with those guys as well. And you had that veteran presence. It's not a given that this group, to your point, it's not a given that they're going to have that in front of them. So you need at least one guy that can come in and if not play right away, at the very least push guys to where if he's not playing, it's because Luke Talich played so well. It's because Ben Minnick played so well. It's because of Don Schuler or Bronte or Kennedy Urlacher or Tabron Benny Powell played so well. So I think that's a great point. This is now, it was always an important recruitment from the standpoint of you need more elite talent. And Ryan, you and I have both talked about this. Jaydon, we grade out as a top 50 national recruit. Yep. Like he's that kind of player. And I think, Sean, by the nodding of your head, you agree with that. I mean, this isn't just a good player that this is an elite difference maker type of kid. You needed that anyway. Now that you need it just from a number standpoint, on top of that, potentially makes it even more important. Makes it even very more important. And if you get your numbers right in this class, Ryan, it also allows you to zero in on a smaller but more impactful group of guys in 2026.
Right.
And that's going to matter as well. So we'll see how they close. That wraps up the midweek visits, Ryan. And then, of course, a day afterwards, another group of guys show up. One very important position, as we said, receiver, vitally important. I want to start off with Ryan Tanook Hines, the kid from Texas, because this is the kid that we felt Notre Dame was in a pretty decent place with coming in, but the visit was going to be huge because he'd just been to USC and Texas the 2 previous weeks, 2 programs with a much, much better track record of producing impact wide receivers with those particular coaching staffs. So this visit was going to be huge for Notre Dame, Ryan. And I wrote an article on yesterday, where I made the case that, look, they need 3 guys, in my opinion. And all these guys are impactful players, but I think his unique skill set, his specific skill set, might be the thing that this team needs the most from the guys on the board. That's just my opinion. But the fact is, Ryan, Ryan pointed out this to me, Sean, and all of you. But Ryan texted me, goes, "Do you know that Tanook Hines' junior track numbers are actually better than Micah Bell's junior track numbers?" I was like, "Wow," because I think didn't Micah Bell have like the 5th best 200-meter dash time in the country when he ran the 20.8? So yep. Ryan, big weekend with Tanook Hines. What's the feedback? What are you hearing about how things went with him?
Yeah. So gotten some feedback on both sides, both on the Hines side and both on the, obviously more the Notre Dame side from a source perspective. And I mean, first and foremost, yes, he's more of what you need, right? You need like this combination of speed and physicality as well. Like Tanook is not just a speed guy. Like he has shown the ability to win through contact and elevate for the football, but he's a 10.45 100-meter runner. He's a sub 21 200 runner, which is flying. I mean, he could legitimately run track for the 200 at least at a very, very high level in college. I mean, he ran like a 20.77, I think was his time as a junior. I mean, it is flying, dude. He is a fast kid, and 10.45 is nothing to sniff at as well. If he was just a track guy, he is a high level track guy. There's no doubt about it. So you need that dynamic. So the big thing with Tanook took his first visit to Notre Dame actually this offseason. It was an unofficial visit. And I remember he was actually offered in this past December as a Dekaney guy. And I remember for the longest time, for several months, you're just like, he was just kind of an afterthought on the board because it's just like, is there interest there? Like, you just can't tell. I mean, because he's not, it doesn't seem like, he's not prioritizing a visit. He's not coming up. And then he finally comes this spring. And when he got on campus, the interest really started, in my opinion, because for the first time, I think that he could really see himself there, right? See himself in the blue and gold, see himself as a student athlete, see himself as a part of this program. It was huge. Now, why this visit was essential and huge from this perspective is when guys have that feeling, one, you want them to have it again, right? Because that's going to determine if you're going to be able to land them. And I think for me, from everything that I've heard and all the feedback I've gotten, Tanook had that feeling again. Because you do worry, Sean, first time, well, that's awesome. But then the second time doesn't feel as good, right? Where you're just like, oh man, maybe that's not the right fit. Maybe it's not. Tanook had the right fit this past weekend. I think he really feels a part of this program. They are battling Texas, which I would say is probably the other big force. They're battling USC, which obviously is very high on the list as well. But I do think that Notre Dame has put themselves in a very good position to close this one out. There's a lot of positivity on the Notre Dame side, a lot of positivity on the Hines side. I was also told a nice tidbit, again, the support system aspect, Sean, is that, yes, Tanook really likes Notre Dame now, but also was told that dad is a big proponent of Notre Dame as well, and that always matters.
And Brian talked about it earlier, right? Being worried about Texas in this thing. And of course, schools like Texas, they had an advantage previously, right? I believe, you can go over to IB.com. It's a great article about how the transition of the quarterback room has taken place over the last 2 years. You know how impressive that is now to have wide receivers come in and to have Deuce Knight on the visit, to have CJ Carr and Riley Leonard as your starting quarterback, Kenny Minchie as a back, and then 26 with Grubbs is already decided. I mean, look, this is what schools like Texas and Steve Sarkisian and USC, this is what they have in tow. Look at our wide receivers. Look at our quarterbacks that we've developed, that we've put into the NFL. Notre Dame is trending that way. Yes, we have one of the best play callers, or two of the best play callers, USC and Texas. That's what they have. Guess what Notre Dame just got? Who just developed and had the Heisman winning quarterback along with 2 first-round wide receivers.
And the number 1 scoring offense in college football. And the team was a top, I believe, top 5 passing offense last year. Definitely top 10, at least top 10.
Absolutely. So you talk about evening the race out, answering the bell, answering the challenge of bringing the offensive side of the ball from a recruiting standpoint up to that level. Notre Dame has done that. And now they have something to show to young men that come in at those positions to say, you can do the same thing here. So for me, I don't fear Texas as much as I would have feared them if this was last year. If this was last year and I had that offensive staff trying to close the deal with a guy like Tanuk Hines, because his dad, of course, I'm sure he fell in love with the staff, but most parents, as we've said before, they're going to love what Notre Dame has to offer. Parents are supposed to look at the big picture for their kids. It's very hard for an 18-year-old Sean, my big picture wasn't that wide. It just really wasn't, right? I had blinders on in a sense. But when you talk about Tanuk Hines, the second visit is always tough, right? Because there's something to compare it to. That first visit is wide open. You don't know. You walk in wide-eyed and you fall in love. That second visit, like you said, Ryan, does it compare to the first visit? And can it become greater? Can they top this?
Yeah.
And, I love where they sit. For me, I know a lot of people like Meadows, but I've said for a long time, the first time I watched this young man's film, I was like, oh, man, I don't know if we've had somebody like this explosive in a long time. It's been a while. And that was very intriguing. He shot to the top of my board immediately. So go right ahead, Brian.
You had Chris Tyree last year, but you had to move him from running back.
Exactly.
Right? Like, you know what I mean? Like the last time you can look back at it really was Will Fuller. Like Miles Boykin and Chase Claypool were really fast on a per pound basis. I mean, they were sub 4.4s, although I would argue Miles Boykin didn't play like a guy that ran a 4.43. He was very good, but he didn't play like that. But Ryan, you talked about his time. It was 20.71 was his best time. To give some people some context, Troy Pride ran track at Notre Dame, so as a college athlete. And if you look at, let's give some context. Tanuk Hines has 2 sub 4 10.5s this spring. He has a 10.45 and a 10.47. He has 2 sub 21s. He had a 20.71, Ryan, in May, and then he ran a 20.83 in April. Now, usually I've noticed track guys tend to have their best times later in the track year. That usually is the case. He had one in early April. He ran a 20.83. Troy Pride, as a college athlete who ran a 4.4 flat and was pissed about it at the NFL scouting combine, ran a 10.5 flat at Notre Dame. And his best 200-meter time was a 21.51 was I believe his best 200-meter time at Notre Dame. So, and then you look at Braden Lindsey, Troy Pride in high school won the South Carolina State Championship with a 21.28. Braden Lindsey, I believe, won 2 200 meters championships in college or in high school, and we know how fast he was. He won a state championship with a 21.49. Right? And Micah Bell, who had a phenomenal time, who had one of the 5 best track times, his 200-meter dash time, I believe, was one of the 10 best. His best 200-meter track time was a 20.89. That's significantly behind. Like, Tanuk has 2 better than that as a junior.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is a kid that is phenomenal track speed. But you know what, though, Ryan? It's not just track speed. You see it on film. He's got a lot to learn as a route runner and all that stuff, but
Sure.
he usually when you have track kids, they don't always play fast, but then they also don't show the physicality. I think the point you made is very underrated about him as a player, that this is a kid who competes on the football field. He's not just a fast kid that runs by people. If you watch his quarterback, his sophomore film to me was more impressive, showing his speed than his junior film, because he had a better quarterback who could actually throw the ball down the field. Like a buddy of mine was like, I don't know. I don't see the speed. I was like, well, it's because he has a quarterback can't throw the ball more than 25 yards down the field. He'll be about to smoke a guy, and all of a sudden he's got to stop and compete for the ball. But I think that was actually good, Ryan, because it showed that, hey, of course he can just run by high school kids. But he's had to be a kid that competes for the football over the middle on contested throws, Ryan. And I think that observation you made is the best part about it, is this isn't just a track kid. This is a kid who's a track star that is a football player.
Right.
And I think that's huge. That's huge.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I think that the separation or the determination of where he's going to play is going to be determined by that physicality, right? Like people always ask, is this guy an X? Is he a Z? Is he a slot? Like whatever, right? And I think that those things that are determined based upon the physical profile is not only just speed and body type, it's also the physicality. Like I look at Tanu Kynes where I'm just like, I think that for sure he's a Z. Like there's no doubt about it. Get him a free release and let him just explode a field, like fantastic. But the physicality, I could throw him in the slot at times. In a certain situation, against a smaller boundary corner, like I could throw him in the boundary as well, because he shows that he can counteract physicality a ton. So I think that as Notre Dame takes their steps forward offensively, I think trying to find guys that are more alignment diverse is big time at wide receiver. Like it's great to have the designation of an X versus Z versus slot. But I do think ultimately the hardest offenses to cover are teams that have wide receivers that can play all over the place, that can play a couple different spots. And I think that's what this kid can potentially bring to the table.
Ryan, you talk about that. And in the past, Notre Dame has been, W, boundary, X, field, slot. I mean, that's what you played. And the only time it changed is if you went like twins over, and tight end backside, and then the X would come over and the Z would go to the slot, whatever. I mean, it's been that. But when you break down Mike Denbrock's film, that's not at all what it is. I mean, their top concept last year was a slot fade concept. I did a breakdown on it, and if you're on the message board, you can check that out. But when you watch that breakdown, Ryan, Malik Neighbors is catching slot fades. Brian Thomas is catching slot fades. Is it Kyron? Is that his first name?
Kyron Lacey.
Kyron Lacey. And then Chris Hilton is catching slot. Well, of course you expect Chris Hilton to do so, but like Malik Neighbors would line up in the slot in certain looks. He'd line up outside in certain looks. They put Brian Thomas in the slot for certain looks. Now, he was primarily outside, but he would move around. Yeah. You have a coach that understands this is about matchups, and there's going to be times when I want to get this guy who may normally be an X into the slot position. That's been a bit of an evolution for Mike Denbrock, because and I think, I don't know if he's evolved as much as Brian Kelly's evolved and allowed it to kind of transition. I mean, as a shot. I mean, just the game has changed. At Notre Dame, it was Fuller's the X, Chris Brown's the Z, and Amir Carlisle's the slot. That's what it was. And we've seen him change that. At Cincinnati, they changed that. They'd move Alec Pierce around a little bit. They'd move Tyler Scott and Trey Tucker. But I think that's the unique thing about a kid like Tanook, Ryan, because if you're able to land him, and that's going to be important, they've got to close, because it's not going to be an easy close. Like, I think they're in a great place now, but Texas isn't giving up without a fight. USC's not giving up without a fight. There's still a lot of work to be done here. But when you have a kid like this, I think one thing that helps you sell it, and Sean, this is kind of what you talked about, sometimes transition's good, because you're transitioning to where now Mike Denbrock can pop on film and say, okay, this is how we're going to use you. Watch number 8 at LSU, right? I mean, is that not a somewhat, Ryan, is that not a somewhat, a comp that you could say Tanook can look at that and say, that's similar to like kind of how I played a game. 6 feet tall, fast, competes for the football. All right, move them all around. And that's the big thing, Sean, is kids, you and I have talked about this in the past with Alizé Mack. When Alizé Mack at the time was Alizé Jones, and they said, well, why'd you flip from UCLA to Notre Dame? He said, well, when I went to went up to UCLA, they got on the board and they showed me all the different ways they were going to use me. When I went to Notre Dame, they popped in film and showed me how they were going to use me, because they just popped in Tyler Wright for film. When you can show a kid and say, hey, look, this is what we do and this is how we do it, and we have film to show you we can do it. Mike Denbrock's got several. I mean, Will Fuller, Tyler Scott, Trey Tucker, Malik Neighbors. These are all guys, Ryan, that Mike Denbrock can pop film on and say, this is your game, and this is how I'm going to use you. and whether it's Will Fuller catching a bunch of screens in 2014 or just running by everybody in 2015, he used them differently in those 2 seasons as Will's game evolved. And he did the same thing with Malik Neighbors, moving him all around last year. So I think it's important to have that on your sort of in your tool belt, Sean, to be able to say, I could pop in film and say, hey, watch what I did as we were the number one. Here's what Mike Denbrock, hey, we had the number one offense in the country last year, the 2 first-round picks. And, oh, by the way, I also coached the first-round pick because I was the receivers coach at Notre Dame when Will Fuller was here. And your game reminds me a lot of Will Fuller's. So you got a lot to sell there if you're Mike Denbrock, but it's not theory now, Sean. It's you have a coach that can say, I've done this multiple times. I've done this.
Yeah, we look at signing day in December and we shout and we get happy about the classes. But if you dig back and find out what were the small things that got this kid to commit, right? Because it's the small things that really separate staffs and programs in the minds of a kid or the minds of a parent. And that's what we're talking about with Tanuk Hines when you talk about the wide receiver position and 3 schools like Notre Dame, USC, and Texas. What is it about this staff? What is it about Mike Denbrock? What is it about Mike Brown, Gino Guidugli, and the rest of the offensive staff that's going to make Tanuk say, you know what? I might not be able to see it from a historical standpoint like the other 2 programs, but I definitely can see myself being everything that I want to be at Notre Dame. So it talks about the big picture of the visit, but it's going to be those small details that you pointed out about Alizé Mack in that visit, what things took place that might be small, minor details to other people, right? We can go back to the Charles Jagger that small film session. That's 1.5 hour film session stood out in his full recruitment amongst the other schools. What small detail is going to stand out for Tanuk Hines and some of these other top guys as they get ready to close this class? That's going to be vitally important for Notre Dame and the staff to be able to close these guys.
Speaking of closing, and speaking of Bishop Gorman stars, there is a player that was also on campus this weekend, Ryan. Derek Meadows was on campus this weekend as well. You and I have spent a lot of time doing digging on this one in recent weeks. And the thing that I'm adamant about, you're adamant about, is Notre Dame was absolutely trailing, and this is from every source that we have inside the program and out, was absolutely trailing for Derek Meadows coming into this visit. And while we still have there's a big old visit in Tuscaloosa coming up here pretty soon, but Ryan, I don't know that Notre Dame could have done a better job of really knocking it out of the park and putting themselves in a position where this is now a dogfight, where maybe a week ago I'd have been like, yeah, I don't see it happening. And now it's like, okay, they're in it. And it was the all-around aspect to it, Ryan. Let's talk about where things are with Derek Meadows, because obviously with all the intel we got, Notre Dame absolutely knocked this one out of the park.
Yeah, they seem to have aligned not only with what Derek Meadows wanted to hear and answer all the questions he had and that type of stuff, having the sit downs with coaching staff and being able to talk about his uses in the offense and how they see him fitting. And it's been the consistency about Notre Dame, which is why Derek Meadows they're even in any type of position with Derek Meadows. The other side is that I think that it also is becoming more appealing to the family. And I think that this weekend was big in that regard as well. I would just kind of phrase it like this. I feel like Notre Dame was trailing a couple schools, specifically Alabama, going into the weekend. I think that they are definitely trending upward, which is what you needed to do. Now, there's going to be a question of, did you shorten the gap between you and a couple other schools as far as narrowing the gap and getting an even playing field, or did you take a slight lead? There are some people that believe that they took a lead this weekend, right? And there's others that I believe that think that it's more of maybe just a closing of the gap and being on more of an even playing field. Regardless, you did a great job with Derek Meadows this weekend. You now have a battle down the stretch that you can kind of look to. I think that the thing that's going to cause concern is, one, it's going to LSU and then Alabama. LSU done a good job, but Alabama is the team that I really look at and say that is the team that I would say was the leader and maybe still is the leader. Like, again, there's some debate whether Notre Dame overtook or not. Different people have different kind of sourcing on that. But I think that Notre Dame is going to be in a battle down the stretch. Obviously, the thing that holds you, Sean, right, is that Alabama does have the last visit. I don't think the last visit always matters, but I do think that when it's a potential head-to-head battle or you took a slight lead, I do think who has the last visit can matter in that way, right? But regardless, Notre Dame did everything they could have done this weekend with Derek Meadows. They have severely cut the gap, or not, if not taken the lead heading down the stretch. The question is going to be, did you do enough to outlast that last visit to Alabama? That's the question down the stretch here.
It's amazing, right? Because we talk about transition. The transition with the staff at Washington definitely opened the door in this recruitment for Notre Dame to take steps forward, right? And at one time, possibly be viewed as the leader. And then when that staff gets to Alabama, of course, Alabama jumps back in the picture, right? But Notre Dame had a chance to make an impression during that transition. However incremental you think it might be, it gave them an opportunity. And once again, now they have the opportunity at the OV to once again make an impression, make it a dogfight. All of these things matter. Like I said, great things, hard things, little things. Man, the little thing, even the losses matter. Losing out on kids, but losing closer than you did before matters each year. And then once you start winning, that tips the scale now because kids can see a little more at that particular university. We're talking about Notre Dame than they did previously because they've seen it in action. So this Derek Meadows and the official visit and how it went speaks volumes that it has become a dogfight. If it is a dogfight, that's a positive for Notre Dame in a lot of ways moving forward for that position in further classes when we talk about 26 and 27. So once again, when you sit at the big boy table, I'm not a poker player, but I admit I've watched it on ESPN a few times. Somebody has that 80% chance of winning, and then all of a sudden they flip the river card and everything flips, right? And that is high stakes recruiting for big time talent, man. You can get to a point where, until that river card is flipped and you get to that final decision, it might look like a certain school has the bigger odds or the better odds, but you have to stay in it. And Notre Dame that's the great thing. How long have we seen Notre Dame be out of it after official visits for top kids?
Or Sean, they were the team that was the leader flip.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how many times have we seen that? I mean, for Keon Keeley, all on board, flip.
Yeah,
Ryan, I also want to push back on the notion that there's been this kind of narrative around Derek Meadows that Notre Dame has just been the leader for a long time, and then recently they faded. I mean, you were reporting on Irish Breakdown again. If you're a member of Irish Breakdown, you have a more realistic view of where this one was. That Washington was actually the team, and this is what Sean was speaking to. That it was actually Washington that was the team you felt was the top school for him at the time. And then that staff goes to Bama once they offered. So like the whole Notre Dame was the leader thing, I don't buy that. And the reason I think that's important is to, number one, understand if they don't get him, like, okay, the him to Notre Dame lock thing that people had for so long was never a real thing. But the other part too, Ryan, is if they're able to get him, and again, I share your, like, okay, cool, you made your move, but let's see if you can stay there when he goes to Tuscaloosa. And that's kind of how I felt about Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng and how excited everybody was last week. And I was like, all right, great. Let's see if it's still that way coming out of the Columbus visit. Like that's how you know. But I also think by not understanding, to me, where this recruitment has actually been for so long, I think you might miss a little bit how hard the Notre Dame staff has worked to get here. It's almost like if they get him, it's like, well, yeah, you're the leader forever and you slipped a little bit. No, they have had to come from behind on this one for a while. Because I don't know. I think he was very turned on by two things with Notre Dame, Ryan, and you correct me if I'm wrong. Number one is obviously all the things that go with Notre Dame and the prestige and all that. Number two is Notre Dame got on him early. And there was that appreciative nature of it. Well, those coaches that got on him early are gone.
Right.
The OC and the receivers coach are gone, but Notre Dame had faded for a while for him. This staff has had to work from behind. That's just the reality. And I think this notion of, well, they've been the leader forever. No, that misses the boat on how hard they've had to work to get in this position with him. Sure. And now if they can hold on, that's even better. But this has been a battle. This has not been this, oh, shoot, you led and now you lost it type of scenario that I think some people are painting, right? You correct me if I'm wrong, but that's been my read. partly from talking to you, if they're able to get him, I think that's a big win. I don't think this is you held off. I think this is you were the one others were trying to hold off, and you've had to come from behind and get this one done. Am I off base on this, Ryan? You're allowed to say I am. If
well, no. We've talked about this a million times. We've talked about this a million times at this point. I mean, quite simply, if it was Notre Dame Washington battle when Kalen DeBoer left, it was just Notre Dame for a while after that, right? Because Alabama did not offer Derek Meadows immediately until after Battle Miami, like everybody else did, right? So there was a time there where it was just Notre Dame, and the fact that he didn't pull the trigger at that point kind of tells you he wasn't like fully certain that that was the only school that he wanted to go to. There was time in between then and where we are now, and I think that I have said this, and I believe this wholeheartedly. There were other teams that were trending up. Notre Dame was at best stagnated, but I think that they were trending down slightly as well. And it's not a shot at Notre Dame. It was just Alabama. Look, guys, let's call it what it is. If he ends up in Alabama, it's because 1, he has a relationship with Kalen DeBoer and that staff. 2, they just had 3 wide receivers drafted in the top 4 rounds this past April, including one guy that went top 10 overall in this draft. And Alabama's had a pretty dang good track record themselves of developing wide receivers into first-round picks over the last X amount of years as well. So all those things together, Alabama's very, very appealing for obvious reasons. So if Notre Dame did enough this weekend to outlast a big visit to Alabama this weekend, then that is nothing but credit and huge, huge job by this Notre Dame coaching and recruiting staff, because the chips were against them at points in this recruitment, and that would mean that they did enough on this visit to overtake and to cement Derek Meadows.
Ryan, I don't know if you've been able to find this out, but I'm very interested because you said something that I think I would have played into if I were the Notre Dame staff. I don't know if they particularly did on the visit, but yeah, why weren't you an immediate offer when this staff that was at Washington got to Alabama? Why did they wait? I would play into, maybe not to him, but I would talk to the parents like, yo, what happened there? Why weren't you an immediate offer? Because we've been on you the entire time. Like, what changed from Washington to Alabama? Did they have interest in other guys that they thought were better? I mean, I would have approached it that way.
I'm pretty confident, Sean, that conversation has been had.
Okay.
No, because you're spot on.
Staff. Yeah,
you're spot on. I mean, yeah. Ryan's point is, and Ryan, and this is what I love about Ryan too, Sean, and this is what I appreciate about how bought in he is to what we do here, which is, guys, we're going to be honest with you. We're not going to pump sunshine up your you-know-what and then try to excuse it away when it doesn't go the way we said it. Now, there was always this, and Ryan would say this in private conversations to, I'm sure, to both of us, but it's like, if this kid really loved Notre Dame the way that people say, why doesn't he commit? Because they're literally the only game in town right now in his recruitment.
It was like Damian Shanklin.
Yeah.
Not to that degree in that reasoning, but like it was also
different kids, but similar thing. He was not in a hurry.
There were crystal balls out there for Shanklin, and everyone's just kind of like, well, what's he waiting for? Right? Like what was
Ryan's response? Well, he doesn't like Notre Dame as much as Notre Dame likes him. And I think with Derek Meadows, there was always this desire to see what else was out there. And you know what? Good on him. Because I would have rather him, if Notre Dame gets him, people say, why do you not take commitments from kids who want to still take visits? This is why. Let's say that Derek Meadows would have committed to Notre Dame when nobody else was on him. Do you really think he would have not taken visits? And now you have that whole battle between you and him and the family of, no, if you're doing this, then you're not part of the. And then you have that negativity in there, and that has to be had because you can't set rules and then not enforce them. I mean, because that sets such a horrible precedent. This is why if the kid at all wants to still take visits, you do not try to force a commitment. You don't, because of this. I'd rather never have had him than to have landed him because you were the biggest game in town and then lost him. Same with Damian Shanklin. I'm glad Damian Shanklin didn't commit because he would have decommitted by now, and they would have been out of the game. And so, but if you get him, I think we need to be able to make sure we're giving this Notre Dame coaching staff the proper respect for the way that they've had to come from behind to do it. We're gonna talk more about this one, guys. I don't want to continue going down this because we are going to dive into it even more in our next segment where we're going to talk about confidence picks. And we're actually going to start off with this one. So before we do that, folks, do us a favor, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. share this podcast, not just for share it on the to help us with the algorithm, but also tell your fellow Notre Dame friends and family about what we're doing here. And of course, sign up for the message board at boardsirishbreakdown.com. It's the best way, the number one way that you can support what we're doing at Irish Breakdown. So definitely check that out as well, boards.irishbreakdown.com. So the next segment of the show, Ryan, we're gonna have sort of a confidence level, and we kind of do this. We did it a little bit last year, late in the process of the official visits, and we're going to do it again here. Now that I've been able to get my tongue back on track and be able to put together coherent sentences where I'm not stumbling all over myself, we're going to go through the confidence levels of these recruits. And essentially, this is not a prediction. This is not a crystal ball. This is simply this is a snapshot of where we think things are trending right now. And so with also a look at what factors are still being considered by each prospect. So we're going to kind of go position by position. We're going to go wide receiver. We're going to go linebacker, and we're going to go safety in that as well. And then I'm going to actually add a safety to that board because I want to talk about Ivan Taylor at the end. So you guys get prepared for that. So let's go through this, fellas. I'll bring up the kid. We'll go Ryan, Sean, and then if I have anything different from you guys, I'll add mine at the end. So Ryan, obviously receiver is a big one for Notre Dame. There's 4 kids on the board. We'll see if Malik Clark visits or not. I know we have some skepticism about that. I don't think Notre Dame, and they offered him. He did an interview with you, and then I think the next day he released a top 5 that didn't have Notre Dame in it. Mm-hmm. So we're not going to worry about him just yet. If he visits, then we'll talk more about him. But right now, the focus is on the 4 kids that have visited this last week: Derek Meadows, Tanuk Hines, Dylan Robinson, and John Anthony Hall. So let's talk about those players. And this order is not in any way a order of this is who we think Notre Dame likes the most. And it's just kind of actually it's really up to me. It's about length of time they've been on each one of these kids. So let's start with Derek Meadows, Ryan. What is your confidence level right now based on all the factors that Notre Dame I'll just say it like this. What is your confidence level right now about where Notre Dame stands and their ability to potentially close this one out in the end?
Yeah, so on a scale of 0 to 10, where 0 is no chance at all, 5 is it's kind of a 50-50 chance here. They have an opportunity, and then 10 is he's a silent commit. I would say that Derek Meadows is at 4 for me right now, which I put on the board. Someone asked about this, which is kind of why I wanted to do a little bit of this segment yesterday. They asked about my confidence in Meadows, and I said I kind of went from a 2 before the visits, like almost nothing, to a 4, which I know 4 doesn't sound like super high for guys, but I mean, it doubled up my confidence from the before the visit. And a 4 is within shouting distance of a 50-50 opportunity, in my opinion. If you ask me today, I still, and I know that some people disagree with this, which is fine, but I still believe that Notre Dame is slightly behind Alabama. Like, I just think they're slightly behind. So I think it's a little bit less than a 50-50 coin flip at this point. Now, if Notre Dame is able to continue those vibes down the stretch and maybe the Alabama visit doesn't go overly well, then I think Notre Dame could have a shot in the ends. But if you ask me today, confidence level, I would say I'm about a 4 because I think Notre Dame definitely helped themselves. It's trending in a very positive direction after this visit, but I still would not pick Notre Dame to be the pick for Derek Meadows in the end.
Like I said, I'm very interested in the conversations that not only took place with Derek Meadows, but more specifically his parents, right? Because you have to ask. We talked about a young man that came in midweek that might have been waiting on a certain spot. If I were a parent, I'm like, I know this top kid is coming in after us. Where do we stand in accordance with him? And so in the midst of that, I would sit right where you sit at 4. I might bump it up to 5 if I were a fly on the wall and heard some of the conversations with
Shawnee.
the parents.
I
wish I was a fly on that wall, but
can I get a 6? Can I get a 7? Keep raising it, buddy.
No.
I'll give you a 6.
I'll
give you a 6.
I'll say 4 only because I believe, based upon, and it was encouraging to hear Bryan say that those conversations did take place, because I think that's one of those small things that we talk about that can shift things that a lot of people won't talk about, right? And could possibly, when they get home, open the eyes of a young man to sit down and talk with his parents about, oh, well, this is what we had a chance to experience and talk about while you were doing the photo shoot and hanging out with Deuce and some of the other guys. So I'm going to say 4. We'll get more intel, but I'm definitely open to raising it up to a 5 or 6 because I think the vibes are good, very good. The feeling is very good coming out of the visit.
Based on my conversations, guys, I'm actually going to go 6. I was like probably a 3 last week, so I think I started at a higher baseline, but none of us thought this was going to happen a week ago. But I'm at a 6 now simply because I'm basing on what we know today. And what I think as of today, based on who I talked to, I think that right now I do think that Notre Dame is at the very least pulled ahead, but they've got the momentum. So 50-50 maybe, but I think they've got the momentum. Now that could change after next weekend. And that's the reality. These visits can change things. I could be back to a 2 or down to a 2 next week after the visit in Tuscaloosa. But right now, I think Notre Dame did a phenomenal job with that. I think getting Deuce on campus this weekend was huge for Notre Dame. There's also a ton of great buzz about Deuce right now nationally. You know how well he's playing. There's a lot of attempts.
That's because he's flipping to Ole Miss apparently. So,
well, I was getting ready to say there's a lot of that forced. He's visiting. Ole Miss may be a flip and all that nonsense,
which could help Notre Dame. Not like they're not trying to, but that actually could help Notre Dame. The fact that they're adding so much buzz because they want to make him the flip candidate.
Exactly. Well, that's a great point, Ryan. But what I would say is when kids spend time around Deuce, let's just say this: their read of where he stands in his commitment is a little different than the people whose business model is to generate clicks based off what these kids say. I'll just leave it at that. And that's not trying to take a shot at anybody. That's just the reality of it. The people that talk to Deuce that don't have skin in the game, so to speak, for where he's at with his recruitment, come out of those conversations with very different takes on the solidness of his commitment than national writers. And the take that those kids get is, yeah, this guy ain't going anywhere. I mean, guys, Deuce Knight literally spent the entire week at Notre Dame. They can only pay for 2 of those nights.
And he's been on 10 visits to Notre Dame, man.
It's like his family, they're like we are. They're just people, hardworking people that, paying their bills and going about life. He doesn't come from some super wealthy family. They can just willy-nilly just keep doing all this, right? I mean, so I think that was huge for Derek as well. He could quiet all the noise. Deuce can quiet all the noise. Hey, man, don't put any stock in this stuff. I'm going Notre Dame. And he can explain to them why he still talks to Ole Miss, which we've tried to explain to people a million times. But I think that's all that stuff matters. So I'm actually going to go 6 on this one. I'm a little bit more positive, but I also have the same. I think the difference between us 3 is you guys are factoring in the Bama visit already, which I completely understand. And I'm just kind of saying right now, today, pre-visit, this is where I'm at. So I don't think we're really in that much of a disagreement on this one. Overall, as far as where things go, this upcoming weekend is going to make or break where things are with Notre Dame. Another young man on campus this weekend, Tanook Hines. This is another big one. This is a guy that Notre Dame absolutely wants in this class and needs in this class. Ryan, we spoke a lot about what Tanook can add. What's your confidence level right now that Notre Dame is going to be able to close this one out when it's all said and done?
I'm at like a 7.5 or an 8, like somewhere in that ballpark. I really love where Notre Dame is. I really do. I mean, this is going to be the ultimate. This is going to be the ultimate decision between staying to the familiar, which is Texas, right? Something like that, or going to Notre Dame. I think that those are the 2 front runners for Tanook right now. Like, yes, USC is involved, obviously, but I think Texas, Notre Dame are the 2 most likely teams for Tanook Hines right now. That's going to be the internal debate. So I'm going to say 7.5 because I do think that Notre Dame's the leader. I do think Notre Dame has a great chance, but going down the stretch, there still is going to be that little bit of a back and forth and conversation. Got people around you, people that play for the University of Texas, like kids that that is going to try to keep that kid in the Lone Star State. Like there's going to be that fight, right, from the people around you. I think that luckily Notre Dame has Tanook opinion, and they also have the support systems blessing as if Tanook wants to go up to South Bend, Indiana. So I think that Notre Dame is absolutely the team to beat, but they're going to have to fight that battle of get them out of Texas, forget about what come to be different, like a Jaden Greathouse did, for instance, right? So I would go 7.5 right now for Tanook Hines.
I'm going to say 8. Let me tell you why. I don't really think USC is an issue in this. I just don't. I just don't, man. I think Notre Dame has eclipsed USC already. in this recruiting battle. And now it comes down to, the staffs, right? Because the quarterback rooms looking into the future. Notre Dame's quarterback room is very comparable to what they built in Texas. Sarkisian and, like you said, Denbrock, two great offensive minds. Gino Gaduli is doing work. He's doing work in recruiting, and recruits are falling in love with him. Not just the quarterback recruits, several recruits on the offensive side of the ball have mentioned Gino Gaduli. He's doing work in the Chicagoland area with the 26 wide receivers that they're looking at, and they're talking about Coach Gino. So, look, I just love the overall approach, and I think if you read into the immediacy of the love from the first time Tanuk was on campus, like, I really think they made a major impression immediately. And that says a lot, man, about a young man from Texas who has two big-time programs that produce talent at his level consistently. For him to fall for Notre Dame that way and to then bring it back and have the quarterback, Deuce Knight, there, and for him to get a look at everything. Look, I think they are launching, man. I'll put it into the future. I'm going to say 8 from my lips to God's ears, and hopefully this ends up in a commitment in December. But I really feel good about the way the trend has happened. It's been meteoric, the way this recruitment has happened with this young man.
Yep.
And then, look, the work that has been done in Texas previously. He has Texas kids currently playing for Notre Dame that he could look at to say, okay, well, Jaden Greathouse, we all think Jaden Greathouse is going to be a guy that breaks out this year at the wide receiver position, right? And unfortunately, some of the previous Texas kids are no longer on.
Yeah, even
roster.
without that, Sean, it's Jaden Greathouse, KK Smith, Kedron Young, Darian Bryce.
Yes.
Like and those guys are all dudes. Those aren't like some walk-on kid that, those are players. And those are kids that are he's going to play with each of those guys for at least a year, some of them a couple years. I think that matters. You're absolutely right. That Texas, as we talk about this, how many times we talk about this? Look, we try to make life it's too complicated sometimes, and we try to make issues. What's about this or that? A lot of times, no, it's not about that. It's I'm comfortable. Well, some people are comfortable around certain things. Some people are comfortable with, hey, I grew up in such and such area, and they think it's unique to other things, and so then they're going to relate to people that have that similar background. And when you go to a place that's far away from home, and it's a place that people consider a challenge, and they say, well, I don't know about that place. And then you look and say, well, hold on a second. 2 years ago, this cat was balling on his way to a state championship in my state. All right, how's he doing? Hey, Jaden Grant, hey, KK, how you doing with this? We're similar players. What do you think about all this? Hey, Kedron, you rushed for 4,000 yards in high school. Hey, Jadarian, you rushed for 4,000 yards in Texas. All, I believe, public school kids, right? So Jaden's right. I believe Westlake's a public school, right? I believe Frisco's a public school. I know Denison's a public school, and I'm pretty sure that where Kedron went to high school is a public school. I'm pretty sure they're all public schools.
Lufkin,
yeah. So that's another thing that helps. It's like, okay, I can see myself here because of those experiences. And I think that helps them as well, Sean. I'm going 7. I'm actually a skosh lower on this one, just because of some of the feedback I got. All the feedback I got, is the same as what you guys are getting. I just get a little bit nervous when we're talking about a Texas burner that's being recruited by Texas. That's all.
Sure.
It's just history. There's no special intel that I have that makes me think, oh, you guys are it's just that nervousness. And I do think this is one where Notre Dame getting the last visit amongst the big timers is going to benefit them, because Ryan, based on
Watch out for the Baylor Bears, baby.
Based on the conversation you and I had, it felt like even after visiting Texas and USC, his vibes towards Notre Dame were still pretty positive going into the visit, which is good. So I'm going to go 7 on that one, but that's just more of my own personal skepticism about Texas. Let's go Dylan Robinson, guys. Obviously, he's one we talked about much earlier in the show today. This is an important one too. From the people I've talked to in Notre Dame, they love this kid. Like, they want this kid. This isn't like, to me, it's like, let's say Meadows commits tomorrow and Hines commits the next day. they're on the phone with Dylan saying, all right, you're up. That's my understanding of where things are. So this is to them, this is a guy that they flat out want. So Ryan, how about you? What do you think as far as the confidence level that that the staff is actually going to win this one? What's your confidence level with Dylan Robinson?
I think this might be my highest one. I'm like at 8.5 on this one. I just don't think there's anything about Dylan Robinson that doesn't say Notre Dame. I just don't think there's anything about him. He's not afraid to go away from home. He's a high academic kid. He's a spiritual kid. He's a kid that also understands exactly how the staff sees him, and his family really likes Notre Dame. He's got a great support system. Like, there's nothing about this kid that doesn't say Notre Dame to me, right? Like, I just where it's wild to think about for a kid that was just offered a couple months ago, but this is Notre Dame's to lose. I'll say it. Like, this is Notre Dame's to lose. I think that they have propelled themselves to the absolute leader for Dylan Robinson go down the stretch.
Sean, he's checking boxes, man. Family, faith, academics, not afraid. I mean, he's just checking boxes right now, man. I love it. What say you, Mr. Davis?
Look, I might push all my chips to the table. This would be the one if I was going to push all my chips to the table, right?
So you're going 9?
And I would even think about going 10.
Well, 10.
You can't do a 10. You can't do a 10. That means he's
10 is silent commit. And
is that what 10 represents?
Yes.
Okay, then I'll go 9.995. I'll go 9.995.
We don't round here, guys. We don't round here, so we're good. That doesn't count. That's good.
I'll be the Russian judge in this one, right? But no, I'm really confident with where this kid sits, right? And my question to you guys, I'll put it at 8.5. I'll be realistic and go 8.5. But my question to you guys, what are we seeing, or what can we possibly pull from Notre Dame getting in on two explosive, totally different body types, but two kids that run 4.4 sub 4.5, athletic, that love Notre Dame, seem to love Notre Dame. The family seem to love Notre Dame.
Yeah.
And they did it really fast. Like, these are kids that they did get in on early. They weren't in on early, but somehow, some way, they got in, they made an instant impact, and Notre Dame's in a very good position with both of them. What is that saying about, because a lot of people have complained about recruiting at this position and offensive recruiting, the offensive side lagging behind. What can we pull from this that Notre Dame fans can say, you know what? This is a darn good sign that Notre Dame's been able to do this, because it goes against what they've traditionally done in recruiting, which is, get in late on kids, top kids, and be able to get them to come in and fall in love with Notre
Ryan
Dame.
Dillon's not some 3-star kid that no one ever heard of.
Yeah.
This is two of the services have him as a top 175 kid. This is
consensus 4-star too, right?
Yeah,
so,
right.
Yeah.
I believe so. Because I think because ESPN hasn't graded him at all. 247 and On 3 have him in the top 200, top 175 or 180. Rivals has him as a 4-star, and then ESPN has nothing. So, who knows where they are. But I think what it says to me, Ryan, is this is the weight that Notre Dame's throwing around now. I mean, that's the reality of it. And when they do set their mind on a kid, they go all in. And we saw with KK Smith last year, where Notre Dame, once they went all in, it was like, okay, we're going to, they got in late with Logan Saldate, who's I think Brian and I, you and I both graded him as a 4-star kid, I believe, right? And that was a kid that you just got in and said, boom, and they flipped them from Oregon State really quick. Notre Dame has always been able to throw their weight around. They just chose not to do it, right? I mean, it's like, the president of the United States always has the bully pulpit. The only question is he going to use it or not, right? Like, that's Notre Dame's always had this. It's just, are you going to use it or not? And the reality is I think this is why this past season was important for Notre Dame, because Marcus Freeman, even though it wasn't the growth that we as Notre Dame fans and analysts expected it to be, it was still, in the eyes of young people who aren't Notre Dame fans, a step in the right direction. Not just the better record. Guys, getting that double-digit win figure matters. Even though it's only one game, it matters. But also with an offense that went out there and scored 40 points per game regularly. I think all those things matter. And that's why Notre Dame is being able to get in on some of these kids and be able to put themselves in a good position. Now, look, they got to close, because none of us said 10, right? And Sean jokingly went 9.995. There's still work to be done here. And I think Ryan is correct about the UCLA visit. Like that's why I'm kind of like an 8. What'd you say, Ryan? 8.5, or did you say 8?
I said 8.5. 8.5.
I'm with Ryan on 8.5. I'm not ready to go to 9 yet, just because. I mean, Deshaun, they just got a really big commitment from a kid out in California, the Hudson kid, who's a really good DB. Right? They've got a little bit of momentum just overall recruiting, out there at UCLA. So I just want to see how that visit goes. I want to see how that goes. They've got a really good 26 kid committed at receiver as well. UCLA has the Smith kid that Notre Dame's offered. Right. Smith. So they're doing some things out there. So that visit makes me a tad nervous, but I love where Notre Dame was coming into the visit, guys. I think they knocked it out of the park during the visit. I like where Notre Dame is at, but there's still work to be done, because if the kid's still visiting, then he's not committed. And so there's work to be done, but I like where they're at. Last wide receiver. This is a very interesting one. Ryan, John Anthony Hall, in-state kid, Fishers, Indiana. He's got, I believe, 2 visits left. Was it Purdue and Penn State, I believe, or is it Purdue and Indiana?
And he's got Indiana next week.
Purdue and Indiana. Okay, so he's got 2 more visits left. So this one's not
only one. He's just got Indiana. He's got Purdue this week.
Okay, so he did the Purdue after Notre Dame and then Indiana next week. Got it. Yep. Okay, so had 2 visits after Notre Dame, made one of them, got another one coming up. Yeah, somebody's got to get left out. I mean, this is the thing, is we're going to kind of give these numbers, and somebody's eventually going to have to get left out. They can't take all 4. But Ryan, where are you with John Anthony Hall?
So of a confidence level of where we think, so a confidence level of Notre Dame's chances with the kid, right? This is like an 8.5 or a 9. I mean, I just think that Notre Dame is the team to beat without question for John Anthony Hall. I just always have come back to, is this, because especially if things are trending in a better direction with Derek Meadows, especially, and Tanu Kynes, you're in a good spot with. If you land one of those kids, I feel good about Dylan Robinson. Like, there's just a question of, will there be a 3rd wide receiver spot left this summer? If there is, I feel great about Notre Dame and John Anthony Hall. I just want to take a step back and see what happens with the 2 top guys potentially on the board in Tanu and Derek Meadows. If things go in a very good direction, this might be the guy that's on the outside looking in. But Sean, I have maintained this. If and I keep saying it, and I keep saying it on the board, I've said it on the show, if this is a player that Notre Dame pushes for, I think that they get John Anthony Hall. I just have a question of what the final wide receiver board is going to look like. But if I had to say, what are Notre Dame's chances of getting John Anthony Hall if they push today? It's like a 9. I mean, I think that they'd be in a great spot for him.
Yeah, I think our conversation with him was very telling, in my opinion, for him to be literally hours away from heading out to Palo Alto for the official visit, but still be glowing about Notre Dame. It wasn't just like an interview, oh man, let me just get through this. You could tell, he was really excited about the opportunity for his official visit coming up and the interest from the Notre Dame program and the coaches. And I thought that was very telling. It's something we discussed after the interview, and then the intel you posted after his official visit. I don't see anything different. I think he definitely called himself an Indiana kid, right? And he talked about the pride he had as an Indiana kid.
He called himself a Hoosier, right?
He called himself, he referred to himself as a Hoosier. So when the biggest program in the Hoosier state comes a calling, it's going to make a pretty big impact. And of course, your parents would love to be able to stay home and see you play and get a great education. So
especially, can I just add, Sean, especially because we know the background now of his dad being a military man, where they have moved around a ton. I would think that their family would love to just be able to stay in one spot for once. You know what I mean? So yeah, great note there. Great note.
And once again, we're not talking about much here as far as an athlete and a talent. Like, the kid is ranked, might be ranked a little bit higher than we think on certain websites or certain
by some.
But this is a talented kid. What impressed us was the jump in production. Like, the film was one thing, but just the jump in production. And if he does that and jumps even more, think about the young man you'll be bringing into your wide receiver room just from a confidence production standpoint. So, look, I wish we had enough spots for all of them, honestly, but that's not the case. And
play Dylan Robinson at safety, baby. Play him at safety. Yeah.
I mean, honestly, Ryan, I get it. Like, I mean, he's pretty darn good DB. I'm with Sean. I would love to be able to do that. Like bring a kid in as an athlete. That's the thing that makes it tough. And look, you're as fans, people are going to say, well, I like these guys more, so I'm team whoever, and then maybe they don't want one kid over the other. But the fact is this is a good football player. This kid's a good football player. I mean, he really is. And I'd be happy with any of these kids, to be completely honest with you. His is another kid that's as you mentioned earlier, is a pretty good basketball player. So I'd be all on board with bringing this kid in. I really would. I'd be completely fine if this is who Notre Dame got. It was one of the guys Notre Dame got into class. I mean, he's a darn good football player. I'm at with you, Ryan. If they want him, they're going to get him. It's just what's the timeline, and I don't want this to seem, and this isn't what we're saying. So you all understand, we're not saying like he's at the bottom of the list, and I don't know that there's a very clear 1, 2, 3, and 4 for Notre Dame. I think they're just trying to figure things out. Right. They've got 4 kids on the board. Like you said, Ryan, they're still sorting out, okay, where are we with Tanook? Where are we with Derek Meadows? Where are we with Dylan? Where are we with John Anthony? And trying to figure out, and then they'll push for the guys that they want. I mean, they may decide they may not want to push for one of the other guys. Who knows? We'll see how it plays out. But I do know that Notre Dame likes this kid. I mean, I reached out to a source today and was like, is this a kid you guys want? And I was like, yeah, of course. We love the kid. So it's just about how's it going to shake out. I think they're all top 250 kids at the minimum. I think the floor of them is ranking wise is top 250. And so we're going to see how it shakes out. But he's probably of all of them, the best high school wide receiver of all of them, as far as what he's done in high school so far. And the film he's put together against pretty good Indiana competition. Now, again, it's Indiana competition, but he's done what you're supposed to do when you're a top kid, which is dominate. The thing I do like is he's probably going to be an in-state kid. Purdue obviously is looking at him. Indiana with what Kurt Cignetti is going to do. I mean, James Madison had some pretty darn good pass game numbers last year.
All right.
You know what I mean?
To Stanford. I'm interested to see how high the academics is for him over there.
Yeah. So it's going to be very interesting to see how it plays out. But I like him. I'm with you guys on the number. Let's move over to linebacker, and let's get a couple of them out of the way before we get into the big boys. There's two guys on the board. There's 4 guys on the board. There's 2 right now that aren't getting as much talked about. Let's just go ahead and knock this one out, Ryan. One is a teammate of Dylan Robinson. That is Noah McHale. Who ended up not making an official visit, which says a lot. And I think Notre Dame's focus is on other players. His is on other schools. But let's knock this one out so we can kind of move on from this one. What is your confidence level in Noah McHale ending up at Notre Dame?
This appears to be an Oregon-Texas A&M battle with USC coming from behind a little bit. This is what we call a big fat 0, Sean Davis. Big fat 0.
I would agree with that.
Ryan said 0. Sean seconded it. I'm thirding it. So we're going to move on from that one. Gavin Nix is another one. So Gavin released a top 5 or a top 6?
Top 6.
Top 6 recently. Notre Dame was on it. Notre Dame has been talking to him about possibly visiting in the fall, right? Is my understanding, because again, they're trying to see how the board's going to shake out. So Notre Dame is still in on Gavin Nix right now. And depending on what happens with a couple other kids, this isn't one where it's over yet. I'll let you guys kind of dive in more. But Ryan, let's just kick it to you right now with Gavin Nix, who I've told people, somebody in the chat just said he reminds him of Tavon Coney. I love that comp. I think he does. He's a little bit more athletic than Tavon was, but I think that comp makes a lot of sense. Ryan, where are you at with your confidence level that Mr. Nix is going to end up at Notre Dame?
Oh, it's like a 2 or 3, somewhere in that ballpark. I mean, like if Notre Dame was patient and kept the spot open for Gavin Nix and did get him in for an official, I think they would have a decent chance. Like I do. I think that I've talked to him on the phone a couple of times. I mean, he's a really well-spoken, thoughtful academic kid. I think that he would definitely fit into Notre Dame. Like there's no doubt about it. It's just, man, it's a crowded linebacker board. I mean, what are you going to say about it? There's no shot against him. He's a really good player. If he ended up at Notre Dame, I would be more than okay with it. I think he's good, but it's a 2 or 3 because I just don't know if the linebacker board is going to stay open that long, for one. And 2, I just think that there's a little bit of a linebacker hierarchy, which we're dealing with. And that's not a bad thing if you're Notre Dame.
Ryan, he's made what, 2 unofficials to Notre Dame?
2 unofficials, one last year,
on,
one this year.
on his own dime. So clearly there's interest there on both sides. Absolutely. Sean, what say you with Mr. Nix?
Yeah, I'm very low with this, only because not the interest on both sides, because I do believe that's interest on both sides, but I just think this linebacker recruiting has played out so beautifully for Notre Dame in this class that, you know, it's just unfortunate, right? It's unfortunate, but it is like, it's just amazing. We talked about this last week, Double R, like maybe a month ago. We were kind of like, man, we don't know how this class is going to play out. And then we laughed at, like, coming off of last weekend, we're told doing a recruiting hour where the buzz for a certain linebacker across the nation is a guy that Notre Dame literally was like, we're good. We're just going to go in another direction.
Sean,
and it's like, it's amazing how quickly everything has turned in this linebacker. And then we kind of were miffed about some linebackers they chose not to go after heavily as well, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But the outcome of it is like,
this is
the feeling we have around certain. Yeah.
I think it was partly about the unfamiliarity with just how good of a recruiter Max Bulla is, Sean, right? I mean, like, you heard some great things, but this is his first real class at Notre Dame. You didn't know what he was going to be able to do. So when they trimmed the board and they stopped recruiting guys like Christian Jones and Antoine Delorier, you're just kind of like, and Marco Jones, it's like, why? Why are you doing that? I don't understand why you're becoming so specific, because, you know, those are good players. And if you keep your board a little bit wider, then maybe you come out on top with a couple of those kids as well. But again, I'm going to take a step back and say, with how Notre Dame's trending, I was wrong about their process. I think that they knew more of, like, hey, think that we're in a great position with a couple of these guys, and we knew that we can close it potentially with a couple of them. And hats off to them, because they bet on themselves. Max Bulla bet on himself, and things look like it's going to go in a very good direction for Max Bulla down the road, down the stretch, I should say.
I'm going to say this, Ryan, too, is I still say we were right about one of those guys, and that's Marco Jones, because you should have then transitioned him to Viper, where most other people are kind of recruiting him. That was the mistake. But not recruiting him a linebacker, I'm fine with that, because they only needed one more. That's the other thing, too. They only needed one more. Mm-hmm. And of the guys on the board, once they got Anthony Sacca, that changes things a little bit, because they didn't need all those guys. Only needed one more. So I'm a 2 on Gavin Nix, and 2 partly just because of the timing. I think you nailed that, Ryan. If they miss out, if the next month goes horribly wrong at linebacker recruiting, and because they're still recruiting Gavin, and they get him on campus in the fall, that could change. Because then if they put, like, the full court press on him, and then some of these other linebackers are taking spots at schools that he would want to go to, that will help Notre Dame out. But yeah, when you're turning down Christian Jones and Antoine Delorier, and we're going to look back at the end of this and say, yeah, ended up being the right decision, you know you've done pretty well. And why is it considered the right decision, guys? It's because those next 2 fellas. And that's who we're going to go to next. So Madden Faremo is a guy that was on campus last weekend. Ryan, I remember when you and I first started talking about him, like, that's not going to happen. And it was legitimate, because Notre Dame was way behind with some other schools. He released his top 4, and we were kind of like, from everything we'd been told from our sources, this one just doesn't make it up. Our sources were like, yeah, they're at the bottom of that top 4. And they just kept chipping away and chipping away and chipping away and chipping away. A lot like what happened with Kingston. When Kingston visited for the Blue Gold game as a junior, we're like, yeah, they like him and he likes Notre Dame, but it's going to be hard to get that kid. And then they just kept chipping away, chipping away, chipping away, chipping away, and they got him. And they're trying to do the same thing with Madden Faremo, who's a different type of player than Kingston, in my opinion, but very talented, very talented. So, Ryan, now that we've kind of come out of the visits, where do you see things with confidence level wise with Madden Faremo?
Yeah, I mean, so Notre Dame side of things, they've been confident for a while as far as where they could go with this one. And Madden obviously likes Notre Dame a lot. I've spoken to coaches at J. Sarah Catholic, and obviously they feel that Notre Dame has done a great job. Also, I would put a 9 on this guy. Like, this is a 9 for me, because also the news, and we could talk about it now because people have reported it and people know that he wasn't there. He ended up not going in his Ohio State visit this past weekend as well, which is telling, right? Like, that tells you that clearly there's been a more definitive understanding of where my best fit is. So Notre Dame is absolutely the team to beat. He does technically have an official visit scheduled for Texas this next weekend. We'll see if he takes that, is all kind of put out there. I'm not sure that he will end up taking that one. Notre Dame is without question the team to beat. They have put themselves in a great position to land Madden Faramo, excuse me.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I've messed you up, Ryan. My mispronunciation has gotten you. But yes. So go ahead, Sean. What say you? Ryan, what number did you give, by the way?
9.
Sean,
9. I mean, it might be a 9.5. I'll just say 9 to be
yeah.
fair.
I'm going to go ahead and go 8.5. I'm going to go right under that 9, only because Ryan has talked to him directly. I haven't had a chance to talk to him directly and really get a buzz.
Well, I've been talking to him directly in a long time. I've talked to coaches around him.
Right.
We'll keep it like that. Yeah.
The reason you said that is what I'm about to play into. Like everything we've heard, like this kid, man, he's so quiet. And I think the coach pointed out that the amazing thing that kind of pushed Notre Dame ahead and gave a great vibe is that he just opened up. And the people that know him said, yo, we've never seen him like this before. So that right there makes you say, yo, that's a great vibe. But then we had great vibes from the kid early on in his recruitment, and then he just went cold silent, right, on a lot of people. So with a kid like that, you just never know. It's like 1 minute, like he's here, and then he can come back. That's the only reason I'll take the 8.5 instead of the 9. It's like I'm just kind of playing it cool because you just never know in recruiting. You know, kid might go cold silent again, and then all of a sudden you might hear something down the road. But we'll see. It's good vibes either way.
Imagine playing it safe. Could never be me.
Yeah. So 9 for Ryan, 8.5 for Sean. I'm going 9. I think Notre Dame has crushed this one. I think they've done a phenomenal job. And I think to your point, Sean, that's that family feel. And for kids like him, Kingston, some other guys like that, that's been a huge thing. It's like they certain kids like that, certain families like that, I hear a lot of the similar, like you hear these little like buzzwords, right? Ryan, you used that in a text to me yesterday. And you're like, okay, when you hear certain buzzwords about what matters, you're like, okay, I'm starting to figure out who this family is and what this family's about. And every family's different. And you start hearing, I'm like, man, this sounds a lot like the stuff we started hearing at this time a year ago with Kingston.
Yeah.
You know, because there was all this, you know, to start hearing like, okay, this matters to him. And this, and yeah, football's important, but, you know, are they going to develop him as a young man? Are they going to develop his faith, his spirituality, you know, academically, all this stuff? And you start hearing very similar things. Ryan, it sounds like you got a kind of a build on that a little bit.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, not only the actions very similar and just kind of the vibes of Notre Dame between them, but I've interviewed a lot of coaches over the last couple of years, and the only two people I can ever remember calling a kid a unicorn were Jason Negro from St. John Bosco about Kingston Villiamoasa, and then the head coach of J. Sarah Catholic, calling that about Madden for Ramo, excuse me. So, yes. The unicorn thing before, because I had interviewed the coach before he took his official visit to Notre Dame, but when he called him a unicorn, in my mind, I was just kind of like, is this real life right now? Like, is this exactly Kingston right now? Like, I don't get this one. So yeah, there's a lot of parallels and similarities to Kingston without question.
And who are the schools that Kingston looked at? It was Texas, USC, Ohio State. Throw in Washington in there, and that's the same group that Madden's looking at too. I mean, that's the other. I mean, it's USC, it's Texas, it's Ohio State, and it's Washington. So I'm with you guys on that one. Let's go to this next one. I am very much looking forward to what your guys' answers are going to be on this one. Let's talk about a Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng. Obviously, this is one that's been a very strange. Let's just dive into it, Ryan. We all know the background. We all know the backstory. Let's just get into it, Ryan. Where are you in your confidence level right now coming out of Ohio State? Second, and then also, what else does he have left? But what does he have left, Ryan, and what's your confidence level with Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng?
So I believe he only had one left. Let me just verify that before I say. Yeah, so he's got Michigan this weekend, and then that's his last official visit that he has scheduled for the summer. So it's nearing the end as far as the official visit window for the summer. Now, there's been a lot of conversation of taking into the fall, and the last couple interviews I've done before this official visit to Notre Dame 2 weekends ago was that he was going to take it into the fall and maybe into the National Signing Day. That's kind of been the conversation. Recently, specifically after Notre Dame, there was a conversation about potentially moving up that decision into the summer. So that is at least on his mind. There's not been anything cemented there. No one knows if that's going to be 100% what's going to happen, but it has at least been talked about, which I think is very important here. Now, Notre Dame killed the visit with Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng. After that visit, it was all sunshine and rainbows. It really was. Ohio State, I think, tempers that a good amount, but I will still go a 6 here. Now, a 6, for people that don't understand the scale, again, a 5 is basically saying there's a 50-50 chance, right? Like it's kind of a coin flip between another school. A 6 for me is saying, I think Notre Dame has a slight lead, but also saying that I do think that there's work to be done down the stretch here. I still think Ohio State, USC, and a couple other schools are certainly in the mix down the stretch. But I do think Notre Dame is a slight leader right now. It's now going to be about what happens over the next few weeks. If they're able to keep that fuzzy feeling alive in Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng, because they certainly did that after the visit.
I'm going to go 7, Ryan. The reason I'm going to go 7 is because I'm going to play into what someone else did at their official visit the week before Notre Dame, and that would be USC. And we talked about this. I thought it was very telling. I talked to some people out there at USC that cover the Trojans, and they felt like coming into their visit that Notre Dame had a slight edge. And then they played into the family background. You remember his video where they had him draped in the Ghanaian flag, and they played into that, and they played into the pride of the Ghanaian players that have come through the USC program. So they know family and tradition is very important to him and his family. And they expected Notre Dame would probably play on that as well. But Notre Dame went above and beyond. I talked to.
You mean by literally getting family?
No, exactly. Hey, they were like, we got this trump card. Okay, you played little Joker. Guess what? Here's the big Joker, ladies and gentlemen.
It's the first time Notre Dame played it too, Sean, which I think is important, right? Like that was the first time that he was ever on campus with his brother, which I think is very important.
And I think the buzz for his recruitment went beyond just the campus. Yeah. I talked to multiple Notre Dame players that were in on the buzz of Nathaniel showing up on campus. Like my co-host L was like, yo, they've been talking about this all week amongst the players. Like, yo, this is huge. Like Notre Dame is doing their thing. So that was the concerted effort. And going back to what you said, Bryan, about having these smaller official visit groups and being able to customize the visit more and more to each individual and their parents, and to take the time out to get a Jalen Smith on campus, right? They probably reached out to a Manti. They probably reached out to other great linebackers to see if their schedules would allow them to be on campus. And then, like you said, they knocked it out of the park, man. They knocked it out of the park with the family and with everybody involved. So I'm going to go 7 because I really believe and I really feel that aspect. And when he has said to you multiple times that you've talked to him and used the word family like that's real. That's not just something just to mention. That's real. And when you see other programs playing into that, and Notre Dame is the only one that truly holds that big joker, but they know that lets you know how important others think it is in the recruitment of this young man. So I'm going to go 7 because I think that has been very noticeable to not just Notre Dame, but other schools. Family is very important to him. Culture is very important to him and his family. And I think that bodes well for Notre Dame, hopefully being able to add this young man to the class on National Signing Day.
I'm still at a 6. I do agree that Notre Dame's a slight leader. I haven't gotten feedback yet from the Ohio State visit. This is one of those ones that I'm not going to feel great about till the decision is made. I'm just not, because I think he's a very thoughtful kid. I think that the family part's going to matter, but at the end of the day, Nathaniel will rightly say that might have been best for my brother, but is it best for me? And that's ultimately a decision he's going to have to make. And so while I think the brother aspect gives them a little bit of an edge, they've got to lay out for Nathaniel that Notre Dame is best for him, that he's not going to come here and be Jeremiah's little brother. You're going to come here and be Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng. right? And like that's hugely important, Sean. Hugely
But
important.
don't you think that's why the Jalen aspect was so important?
Very,
Look, not just your brother.
very,
He's a Buckless Award winner too.
very.
He's different.
He's
Different body
Yeah.
type, different style.
And if you know Jeremiah, he is not going to push his brother to Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Meaning there's not going to be any brotherly pressure to follow in his footsteps. He's gonna sell why Notre Dame was right for him and what Notre Dame did for him, but he's going to support his brother no matter what he does. And so I'm still at a 6. If I'm still hearing what we're hearing about coming out of the visit in a week or so, then I'll feel better.
You
but
know
I'm
something,
with Ryan, I'm at a 6. I think there's slight leader, but there's a lot of work to still be done.
And this is me purely reading tea leaves. When I see this kid in the middle of last week with pride post his 4.2 GPA from the past semester, I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. That right there sounds like a Notre Dame kid.
Definitely matters.
Like it
definitely
matters. It matters. So
for sure.
Yeah.
Let's go secondary, fellas. Let's start with Jameer Joseph. Obviously, he visited Notre Dame. He was on campus same time as Nathaniel Usu-Boateng and Madden Faremo. Has since visited Penn State this past weekend. Ryan, does he have Stanford still coming up, or is he still going to take that visit?
No, it's not Stanford. He's South Carolina this weekend.
So he already did Stanford already then.
Yeah.
So he's got those 2 visits coming up, Ryan. Obviously, a lot of buzz with Penn State. Where are you in your confidence level for Notre Dame and Jameer Joseph?
It's like a 3, and it's mostly because there's obviously a lot of buzz of him coming out of Penn State, which was the other school which was the major school to watch for Jameer Joseph, even going into the Notre Dame visit, right? Because you knew that was a school that, for anybody that lives in New Jersey and just in this region right here, whether it's Philadelphia, New Jersey, even down to like Virginia, like that bubble, there's a Penn State allegiance for a lot of kids. There is. And Penn State is a school that does historically very well. And it's a school that is very appealing to Jameer Joseph. I'll go 3 because I don't think it's a dead conversation quite yet, but I do think that it is trending obviously to Penn State. And then also the other factors of if you get Jaydon Blair, Ivan is still technically within grasp, but like, what do you feel is the next best move there? That uncertainty, I think, kind of feeds into it. But I do think that Penn State is the team to beat right now for Jameer Joseph. So I'll go with 3.
I agree with you, Double R. I think this is a situation where, once again, it's unfortunate, but it really is telling of how far Notre Dame recruiting has come. When you have this type of quality kid, might not have a spot. You know what I'm saying? Even if we already have Ivan Taylor. We talked about the confidence we have, or we're going to talk about the confidence we have with the Jaydon Blair situation. Man, it's just one of those things where we knew it was going to be a Penn State Notre Dame thing. The Notre Dame visit went quite well. You talked about that. But I think we had the conversation offline, and I was like, you know what? If I was his dad, I would definitely come into this visit with a list of questions for the staff. I would, knowing the visits that were coming behind, right? And it goes back. I wish I could be a fly on the wall of those parental conversations with the staff, not the player, just the conversations with the parents, right? And it's another situation. I wish I could listen in on that conversation that took place on his visit. But like you said, we expected the Penn State visit to go well. And they have a really good history of their defensive backfield, developing defensive backs, being drafted high. So it doesn't shock me, but I agree with your assessment there.
If Notre Dame was, I'm sorry, Sean. I thought you were
go ahead. You're good.
If Notre Dame was going to get him, they were going to have to be all in.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think they've ever been all in, understandably, because he just grades out lower than, he graded out lower than Mark Zachary and Dallas Golden and Creed Thompson corner. That's why they shifted him to safety. Now, but they like Jameer. They do. Yeah. There's no doubt. They wouldn't have switched him over to safety if they didn't like him. It's just, there were just guys they liked better. That's just the reality of it. And my understanding is they didn't lie to him about it. And that's why I think it was always going to be tough to get him, to be honest with you. So I'm going to 3 like you guys for him. Let's go to a safety that I feel kind of the opposite about, and that's Jaydon Blair. We talked a lot about this one earlier, Ryan. This has been a top priority kid for Notre Dame for a long time.
Yes.
Right now, he had Michigan this past weekend, and I believe he has one more visit coming up this upcoming weekend with Penn State. Right?
No, he has Florida State in the middle
Florida
of this
State,
week, and then he has
Penn State. Okay, so
yep.
2 more visits. You did say that earlier.
Yep.
So he's got 2 more visits coming up, and then he's going to get into. He's another guy that once the visits are over, the family's going to get together and make a decision, and then they'll announce it July 5th.
Yes.
So the coaching staffs for the schools he's looking at will know before July 5th, but he'll announce on his birthday on July 5th. So Ryan, where are you in your confidence level with Jaydon Blair as we head into this final stretch?
It's an 8.5 or a 9 is kind of where I'm at with Jaydon. I've maintained this for the last couple months. I think Notre Dame has been the leader for him for a long time. I think they were a leader for him when Chris O'Leary was here at the tail end. I think that Mike Miggins picked up where they left off, and they've been the leader since then as well, even through a little bit of uncertainty at that point of a coaching transition. This is a young man, whether you know him or his family, it's a very easy fit into Notre Dame. 6'4", 190 plus pounds. I don't know if people know this, but the family actually knows Kyle Hamilton as well. I don't know if that's kind of been out there in the universe, but like they do know Kyle Hamilton as well. So the projection to being Kyle in the next level is a very, very easy one. And then from a personal student perspective as well, he's a clear Notre Dame kid. There's no doubt about it. So yes, Penn State has done a good job in this recruitment, and they do have, quote unquote, the last shots. Michigan had some spots where they did a really good job, especially late with Jaydon Blair. But I do believe going down the stretch, Notre Dame has built a pretty good lead in this one. And even with a great Penn State visit, I think it could still be enough to win this one out. I feel very good about where things are with Jaydon Blair. I'll say between an 8.5 and a 9. I think that they've cemented themselves as the team to beat for Jaydon.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. 8.5 to 9, that's a great range. Confidence coming out of the official visit. That was confidence going into the official visit. And you just wanted to see if Notre Dame could do their due diligence and answer any questions that his family had, and then just take it to the next level and get this guy lined up to go ahead and sign on the dotted line come December. As I said before, it's been one of the most pleasurable for this reason. Yo, when you watch someone say something and it plays out the way they say it, it's like, you know what? You feel like that's someone I could trust.
Yep.
Contrast, we've had kids that said all the right things, and for some reason you just get a feeling like, I don't know, right? And everything is lined up. And that, for me, that makes me feel very confident in this young man landing in the class of 2025. I feel really confident about him being in the class. I really do. I really do. And the importance now, like you said, with the situation with Ivan Taylor, it's become even more important. This recruitment has become even more important. And I think that actually, that might be a little bit over the top, but I think the Ivan Taylor situation kind of even ramped up just how important he was going into his official visit. I think they were still going to have him as a high priority.
No, that hasn't changed anything about Notre Dame's. Like Ryan's trying to send me the chat. Like, somebody said Notre Dame's, feeling the love from Notre Dame now because of Taylor, and I think Ryan is absolutely right in his response. Like, Jaydon Blair was always a top priority. All the Taylor stuff has done is make it more important that they land him.
Mm-hmm.
Notre Dame hasn't changed anything with how they're recruiting Jaydon, because they were recruiting Jaydon like a guy they had to have before then. That doesn't change the priority that he is. It just changes, like, you miss him now, you're in trouble. And I think that I'm just going to go 8 on that one, Ryan and Sean, just because, again, there's still 2 visits coming up, and you never know what's going to happen. I do feel like I'm probably a little low on this one, to be honest with you. I think Ryan's 8.5, 9. Your 9 is probably more there. I'm just trying to, just 2 visits coming up and some different things. I just want to be a little bit more cautious. But again, my cautious is 8. You know what I mean? That's like on the verge of committing. They just got to close. They just got to finish. That's the big thing. They just got to finish. But I feel very good about where Notre Dame is. We're going to talk about one other kid at the end, guys. And I left him out of the earlier thing for a reason, because what I want to just kind of do it all at once. and we're going to talk about Ivan Taylor. And to begin, Ryan, I want you to talk about how the weekend went, just kind of recap the visit, and then coming out of it, what is your confidence level that Notre Dame keeps him in the class?
Right.
Whether it's he decommits and eventually comes back or just stays in the class, to me, they're the same. What is your confidence level that on signing day, Ivan Taylor signs with Notre Dame? So first, Ryan, just kind of fill in, share kind of how the weekend went and all that different stuff, and then we'll give our confidence. You can give your confidence pick, and then Sean, you can go, and then I'll wrap up.
So I mean, like for the major backstory for people that don't follow recruiting, Ivan Taylor has been committed to the staff since January. A early commitment since December of this past year. So very early on in this process, Ivan Taylor was committed. He surprisingly took an official visit to Alabama 2 weekends ago, which from that moment, you kind of got an eyebrow raised and trying to figure out what the heck is going on here, right? That's kind of odd. So the latest was, yes, he still took his visit to Notre Dame. I had a conversation with him on Friday, and I had some intel on the board, and I turned it into an article that he had talked about. He said he didn't want to rush the process, and he wanted to make sure he was making the best decision, and he wanted to see what other fits are potentially out there to make certain of his decision. And at that point, because it had been reported that he was also going to take a visit to Michigan, he was going to take a visit to Florida. He is taking the visit to Michigan this upcoming weekend, but the Florida one was not cemented at all. So maybe he takes a visit to Florida at some point, but that has not been cemented to my knowledge at this point, unless it has over the last 24 hours or so, right? So visits are still on the table for Ivan Taylor. Now, as a Notre Dame fan, I was hoping that after the visit this past weekend that, he's not taking the visits anymore and he's locked in and we're all good. We're good to go here. Let's move forward as a great 2025 class. Unfortunately, a lot of mixed vibes for me on my conversation with Ivan on Sunday. I'll kind of phrase it as this. It's been consistently maintained that he's trying to find the right fit for him. That opinion did not change before the weekend. Now, the weekend went really well. Deuce was there, spoke a lot about Deuce, spoke a lot about Ethan Long. He spent a lot of time with Davion Dixon, the defensive tackle commit. By all accounts, the weekend went very well. And he said that he still likes his fit with Notre Dame. But after that conversation, I am very unsettled with it, to be honest with y'all. I'm very unsettled. He's going to continue taking visits. I think he likes Notre Dame, but I've said this on the board a couple of times already. I think that maybe he needed to do a little bit more digging into some other schools before he made his commitment in December. I think that maybe he slightly rushed that decision because, one, he loved Chris O'Leary. His mom loves Notre Dame. I think his dad likes Notre Dame. So, like, everything aligned at that point to make a decision. I think that ultimately time has caused him to second guess that decision ultimately. So, moving forward, he's going to take some other visits. So unsettled is the best word that you can use at this. If I had to put a confidence pick on this, it's low right now, to be honest with you. The fact that Notre Dame wasn't able to lock it up this weekend from Ivan's perspective is a obvious concern moving forward here. So Notre Dame is not dead. I don't think Notre Dame has no chance by any means, but if I had to put a number on it, I would say it's less than a 50% chance he ends up in the class. It's kind of my vibe right now. I would say a 3, maybe a 4 on a good day. I think Notre Dame still has a chance, but I do think that this is a very troubling situation, Sean.
You know what? I'm going to show some goodwill here, Double R, and I'm going to say 4.5, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
I agree with everything you said. I'll take it a step further. And being nice, the whole Chris O'Leary thing, nah. I think you found an exit ramp for what's been there a long time. And Chris O'Leary was the low-hanging fruit in this recruitment. That's just the way I feel. And that's the nicest way I can put it. That's not to say anyone was being disingenuous in the beginning, because I do feel like there is love for Notre Dame from everyone involved. But at the end of the day, I think these were conversations that have been taking place while Chris O'Leary was still on the staff, despite his love for Chris O'Leary. Because certain things happen. How can I put this? They say a drunk man tells no lies. But alcohol doesn't magically just put thoughts in your head. There had to be something there at the root that it actually excavates because of the influence. And I think, I'm trying to say this without trying to put a negative light on the young man, because I'm totally open for any young man going through the process however he feels like he needs to go through, him and his family. I have absolutely no problem with him visiting Alabama. I have absolutely problem with nothing he's doing and visits that he's going to eventually take after Notre Dame. Take your time, make the right decision. But I said this earlier, Notre Dame and who they are and how they operate has a way of smoking these things out during the process. It just happens. It's going to happen, right? The rules they have in place, it just smokes these things out. So would it shock me if a decommitment came before the fall to say I'm opening things up, but Notre Dame's still in it? No, it wouldn't shock me. It wouldn't shock me at all. But I'm going to give some grace on this situation because I do think the relationship that he has with Ethan Long means something. I do think Deuce being on the campus means something. I do think having some of the committed players there and taking a picture on the field with Marcus Freeman the way they did and the vibe surrounding the official visit, I think it means something. I think having the other NFL dads in the building and taking a photo shoot, I think it means something. How much it means in the end, we have to let it play out and wait and see. So based upon that, I'm going to say 4.5, and just trust that, what did exist and allowed him to commit is strong enough to keep him in the class. But I have my red flags. I have my trepidation about the situation and the way things have played out a little bit. But, I'm just going to try and look at it positively until, I see anything else definitive come out of the situation.
Couple things. I want to somewhat agree with you and then somewhat disagree with you, Sean. I do think if Chris O'Leary was still at Notre Dame, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Yeah,
because
I think started a ripple effect at least, right?
Because what I think happened is there was something at Notre Dame he was very comfortable with, and when that thing left, I think what that did is that opened up some doubts that were maybe already there about whether or not he committed too soon. And I know this is something Ryan and I have talked about.
Absolutely.
So I don't know that, like, if Chris O'Leary was still here, I don't think we're in the same boat.
Did I say if Chris O'Leary was still here?
Yeah.
Maybe.
You said you said it wouldn't matter if Chris O'Leary was here.
No. What I was saying, if Chris O'Leary was still here, the same thing just wouldn't have come out. Like, the doubts are there. You just said pretty much what I was saying. The doubts were there. Chris O'Leary covered it up because he was comfortable with Chris O'Leary.
Because I think Chris O'Leary is what he ultimately committed to.
Yeah. That's so we're saying the same thing.
So I don't know that there would have been doubts if Chris O'Leary was still here, because it's like you want to play for this coach, right? That's kind of where I'm coming from. So, but I also agree, but where I do agree with you is for sure is I don't think this is just about Chris O'Leary.
No.
Because if it was just about Chris O'Leary and relationships, why is he looking at Michigan? Their coach got hired after Notre Dame's DB coach. I mean, literally, Michigan has a new DB coach, Florida has a new DB coach, and Alabama has a new DB coach. They're all new DB coaches. And so I just think I think the issue I go down to is I believe Ryan said this to me, and I think he's spot on. I think the kid committed sooner than he should have. I think that's really what it boils down to. And now there's some uncomfortableness there. And Notre Dame has to be careful how they respond to it. If you put too much pressure on him, he's just going to go away. And at the same time, if you are too patient, then it comes across as like committed kids can just do whatever they want. So I think what Notre Dame has to do is, look, find his replacement. And if you can find someone, you find someone. But until then, you keep recruiting the heck out of this kid because he's a really good football player. But I agree with you. I don't think this is Chris O'Leary left. And so now, I need to, it'd be one thing if the schools he was looking at, he had longer relationships with. We've seen that all the time, where kids getting recruited by a school for a couple of years, and then the coach he liked at one school left, and he's got this great relationship. I just think there's something else there. I don't know that I can even put my finger on it. There's something else there mean, everything checks. Academic kid, family seems to support Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Support system seems to support. I mean, Notre Dame has literally landed kids from his high school, and they've had success at Notre Dame. So I don't know what it is, but there's a roadblock. There's a mental block there for something. So what's going to happen is, it's like, you guys ever seen the movie Couples Retreat?
No.
Right? Like, this is kind of like, what's the cat's name, Sean? Oh man, he's also in Money Talk. Faison Love. Where his wife leaves him, and then she has to go out and experiment because she they got married too soon, and she wasn't experienced in certain things, and then she left, and then she realized, like, you know what, he was my one true love, and in the movie they come back together.
Yeah.
Right. Like, maybe that's what happens, right? I mean, it's that whole expression that if you love something, let it go, and if it loves you back, it'll come back, kind of thing.
Yeah.
I'm actually a little bit optimistic that this may end up eventually being good for Notre Dame, and what I believe Notre Dame's strategy is going to be, I think, is going to allow that opportunity to be there. And in the end of the day, I think it's going to help. So I'm actually at a 5. Okay. I actually feel like there's a good shot that eventually going to come back, because I'm projecting down the road. If it were today and he were to commit today, I'd probably be where Ryan is, to be honest with you. I think Ryan gave a perfect snapshot of where it is today. I just kind of feel like we've been here before, and this feels more like a Stephon Tuitt situation to me than it does a Keon Keeley situation to me. That's where I'm at. And so ultimately, I think in the end, if Notre Dame is able to kind of be patient, I think this one ends up coming back.
Once again, the small things matter, right? What was that conversation with Mike Mickens like this weekend? That goes a long way. What was it about Chris O'Leary that he was able to settle things down and answer questions that I'm sure came up along the recruiting? My point was, regardless of whether or not Chris O'Leary was here, he's a kid that I feel like you were going to have to continue to recruit into the fall, even if he was committed. You have to stay on top of this kid.
Then we're on the same page more than I thought.
Oh, absolutely. Because I do think his father has connections. His father should do his due diligence for his son and should raise questions and should.
As long as a father is allowing his child to make the best decision for himself, then I believe it's a dad's job to make sure that I mean, like you guys, Sean, I'm sure you had that conversation with your daughter when she was looking at schools. Ryan, I know you're going to have that with your daughters when they get to that age. It's unfortunately a long way off, where your job is, have you really thought about this? Have you thought about that? You sure you don't want to go visit here? You want to make sure you go visit there. I want to make sure that when you look back at this, 10, 20 years from now, you don't have any regrets.
Yeah.
And so I have no problem with that, as long as it's not pushing them away from something because you feel a certain way about it. And I haven't heard that that's the case. So that's, I haven't heard nothing but positive things. So I just think in the end, this is going to be more like a Stephon Tuitt, Deion Colsey situation, as opposed to Keon, Dante, Peyton Bowen type situation. And they just got to let it play out. So that's where I'm at on that one.
Could I ask Double R one question?
Yes.
Do you feel like the vibe, do you think the conversation when you did speak to Ivan after the visit, that the vibe of previous conversations seemed different? Did it seem like he was trying to play it a little bit more close or guarded about what he said?
You mean my conversation before and after the visit compared to previous visits?
Yeah.
He's always the same kid, man. I mean, he's super respectful. He still calls me Mr. Roberts, even though I've told him that he doesn't have to call me Mr. Roberts. Like, he's one of those kids, right? Which is why he's such an easy Notre Dame fit, which is the frustrating part of this whole situation. But Sean, I mean, he's an honest kid. Like, he is. I don't think he's trying to hold anything in. I genuinely do believe him, what he's telling me. I do. And I think that when you paint what he's saying to the whole process, I just think he committed too soon. I mean, I just really think that's what it was. I think he was comfortable. He loved Chris O'Leary. He did. I mean, just flat out, he loved Chris O'Leary. He had his family support. He said Notre Dame, and that was it. But I really do think that it probably still would have been Notre Dame if he would have waited a couple months. But I think that we wouldn't be here if he waited a couple more months. I think that's the issue right now.
Ryan, so this is kind of how I read your situation. If I'm reading you correctly, had he waited, then we might be in a situation where he's about to commit to Notre Dame here after all the visits are done. Is that kind of
or it might have been a couple months ago, and I just think that
but Notre Dame would still be in the pit. That's why I believe ultimately he comes back to Notre Dame, because there wasn't a situation like, I think, Ryan, again, I'm not disagreeing with you. I think you've nailed the snapshot of where it is today. I do. I'm not pushing back. I just feel like, because of what you just said, and I think you are spot on this one, because you've been telling me for a while that you just felt that even when he was back on board, there just was some, there just was
uneasiness.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it, Ryan. So my thing on this is, I think Notre Dame has played it right. That they haven't done the force them to decommit publicly, which was never their rule. Their rule was never force public decommitments for a kid committed to Notre Dame. That is, if you were committed somewhere else, you couldn't visit Notre Dame officially unless you decommitted, but they never did that with their commitments. And so I think they've handled it well. And I believe that in the end, all the things, Ryan, I still have the interview you did with him in my head. Didn't he do it at church? Right? I remember that one.
I think he just had Bible study, and then he came on afterwards. I think was what it was.
And so I just feel like in the end, he's going to visit Alabama and visit Michigan and visit Florida, and maybe even take some visits into the fall. I just think in the end, he's going to pick Notre Dame again, but just for the right reasons. I could be completely wrong on this one. And I'm going more off of just past history and things that I hear and things that I know, because my sources that I talk to aren't confident he's going to stick in the class ultimately. And so this is more of a gut. And I trust you, Ryan. So it's just more of a gut on who I think the kid is and how I think Notre Dame is going to handle it. But I also think that's why getting Jaydon Blair is so important. Because if you can land Jaydon Blair, that allows you to take a deep breath and say, we don't need a third safety. We want a third safety. And that would allow the staff to then say, okay, we've got a couple things we're working on over here, but we can be patient and fill this process out to see how things go. So that's why I think it's imperative that they close the deal with Jaydon Blair, because then that's going to make it easier for them to then recruit Ivan back, where, if not, you get into a panic mode. So that's kind of where we are with those. So, guys, that's going to wrap up the confidence level. We got one more thing coming up. We have an interview with a very talented 2026 player coming up. So we'll introduce that here in a minute. But before we get to that, folks, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast, give us a 5-star review. Greatly appreciate that. And sign up for the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. We're going to have a lot more intel coming up. Got some team intel, all that type of stuff coming up. So we're going to get to that here in a minute. And we're going to talk about what we've got coming up next on the Irish Breakdown podcast. So, guys, final part of today's show is Ryan was able to sit down with 2026 commit Elijah Golden. And Ryan, you were
not commit.
Sorry, Notre Dame target. You are correct. Yes. He's not a commit. That wasn't a slip up. He's not silently committed, and I screwed it up. Notre Dame target Elijah Golden. He's got a great name, by the way. He's currently at IMG Academy. I believe he's a native of Virginia, I believe. Yes. Correct. Yep. So obviously he's got that working for him. But Ryan, let's give a little backstory. He was on campus recently, and he's a guy that Notre Dame is very, very high on early on in the 2026 process. So let's update the people on Elijah Golden, and then we will get to his interview.
Yep. Fascinating kid. Absolutely fascinating backstory. So he's from Fredericksburg, Virginia, originally, And actually, when I interviewed him, he was back in the state of Virginia doing the interview with me. So IMG Academy kid now. He actually was one of the rare ones where, so how we know how IMG works, IMG can pretty much recruit whoever they want around the country. And then usually guys that are already dudes come down to IMG for like a year and then are dudes at IMG. But this is a rare kid where he went down to IMG before he was an established dude. So actually during his sophomore year, he was not a part of how kind of IMG runs it, is that they have the varsity level, which is like 2 squads. There's a blue team, there's a white team. And then under that is a national team, which is basically their JV team, right? And this was a young man that was on the national team this past year. And despite that, has a healthy offer list and is rated by one source, I think it's 247 Sports, as number 18 overall player in the country. Now, obviously, that is projection. And why that is projection is what you have seen this offseason. He's been working with personal trainers. He is now up to right around 6'4" and 270 pounds. And if you've watched his film or just seen him work out, really impressive wingspan as well. And despite the fact that he has not cemented himself as a star on the highest level for IMG Academy yet, Notre Dame took notice very, very early. He was a part of the Pot of Gold offer event on St. Patrick's Day for him. And this is a young man that Notre Dame is very high on, a guy that was also on the short list or on the list of players that they were going to call on July 5th or on June 15th, at midnight to make sure that they got a call to Elijah Golden. So very fascinating backstory here. Went to Notre Dame for the first time earlier this offseason, came back again. I don't want to go too deep into, well, actually I can go deep into this past conversation because I actually interviewed him before he took his last visit to Notre Dame last week, but he had a 2-day visit at Notre Dame, actually got some field work in with the coaches, kind of like an evaluation camp type of feel to it. And he's very high on Notre Dame so far, as you'll hear in this interview. A fascinating kid that, again, despite not being a star yet on the IMG at the highest level, is a player that not only is accumulating a lot of impressive offers so far, but the number 18 overall player in the 2026 class, according to 247 Sports, a fast rising defensive lineman in 2026, and a very interesting backstory to keep close eyes on.
So, Ryan, let's bring up the interview that you had with Elijah Golden. When we're done, we'll come back and wrap things up. And
welcome everyone to the Irish Breakdown Podcast. 2025 is almost wrapped up, so we're really digging deep into the 2026 recruiting class and giving you all some deep insights into Notre Dame's board right now and the players that they are definitely pushing for in the 2026 recruiting class. And we have one of the more talented defensive linemen in the 2026 class now joining the show out of IMG Academy, Bradenton, Florida, originally from the state of Virginia. Got Elijah Golden, star defensive lineman, rated as high as the number 18 overall player and 2 defensive linemen in the 2026 class by 247 Sports. Elijah, appreciate you for hopping in, man. How's everything been going?
Good. Yes, sir. Everything been going good.
Yeah.
This off season, I just been working with Foot Dr. Scrap. He coaches at Friendship right now, and yeah, just been working.
Well, that's one thing I was going to ask you, man, because for anybody that follows you on Twitter, I know I've been seeing a lot of the videos popping up of you working out in the sand and just putting in that work, man. How's the off season been so far?
It's been good. It's very tiring, but it's supposed to be. It's a process. You know what I'm saying? It's a process.
Yeah, well, no doubt. And I know that, obviously, and we were talking beforehand. And so when people hear IMG Academy, Elijah, obviously you think of kids from all over, right? Because that is a school that attracts everyone to come down, play in Bradenton, and be developed, obviously, for the next level. I know we were talking beforehand, but you're originally from the state of Virginia. So I would just love to hear a little bit of your background, where you come from, and how ultimately you decided to come down and play football at IMG Academy.
I'm Elijah Golden. I'm originally from Fredericksburg, Virginia. I've been living here all my life, and I came down to IMG to get better, and I've seen that the competition is very elite and very high, and also I came down to IMG because of the coaching. The coaching, it would develop you for that college level and that next step in life.
Well, and I would love to hear, because I know playing against obviously a lot of great competition on a week-to-week basis is very important. But, and this is a cliche sometimes for some people, Elijah, they say that you don't see as good a teams on a week-to-week basis as you see every day in practice. But for you, that is legitimately a statement that is true, right? Like, you're seeing 4 stars everywhere, 5 stars on the practice field. What has it been like for you since coming to IMG and being able to play with so many great teammates, so many great athletes, and really test your skill set against some of the best players in the country on the practice field?
It's really a blessing to be down there and to play against them. I also learn, you know what I'm saying, from the other D linemen that are my teammates. I actually learn from them and learn what moves I can do on certain type of pass sets the old linemen do. And
Well, and I would love to hear, because you are a young man, although 2026, so just entering your junior year. Like I said, you have a great recruiting background already as far as the rankings, but you also have a really nice offer list so far. Obviously, I have you on here to talk about Notre Dame at some point in this podcast, but can you just give me a little bit insight as far as how blessed you are to be in the position you are, right?
Okay.
Because you have a lot of great opportunities, obviously, for the next level.
Yeah, it's a few schools I've been in contact with: Indiana, Virginia Tech, UNC, Florida, Tennessee, and Ohio State as well. I'll be camping at Ohio State June 17th.
That's awesome, man. And so I want to hear, I know you have that return visit to Notre Dame coming up pretty quickly. First time on campus in South Bend. What was that like for you? Because I know when I talked to you originally, just after the offer was coming and all that type of stuff, I know you had a lot of great things to say about Notre Dame at that point. But what was it like getting up to South Bend for the first time? Just kind of describing that trip.
Man, it was priceless. It was very like the campus is very beautiful. Like that golden dome that they have right there is very. I love it. I love it, and the atmosphere is very good. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and you're coming back obviously for a return trip, so I know it impressed you. What are you looking forward to for the next trip here next week? Just being able to get back up to South Bend.
More me um, getting to know the coaches even more, and also knowing like the program more, like the more about the football academics, and yeah.
So as far as the coach is concerned, obviously I know you've had conversations with Al Golden, obviously, Al Washington in the past. I'm sure you've talked a little bit to Al Golden as well, the defensive coordinator. Can you just talk to me about a couple of the coaches that you've been developing relationships for Notre Dame so far, and just how those relationships are growing?
Coach Sebastian, me and him are growing a relationship. So
Nice.
as Chad Bowen, the director of recruiting, me and him is, yeah, we starting to get there very close. And that's really it. And also Coach Freeman as well. Coach Freeman. I talked to him on my last
Nice.
visit.
Well, and I would love to hear, obviously sticking with like the Notre Dame centric side of the conversation, what has just been, I guess, even maybe before you were offered by Notre Dame, before you started to get to know them a little bit more and know the program a little bit more, what was your initial impression of the Fighting Irish, of the program? Like, what did you know about the program before that offer even came?
I didn't really know nothing about them. I know that they have a good school, a good academic program, and a nice football team. I knew that. That's really it. Yeah, that's really it. But I always like wanted to get that offer though. Like growing up, I always wanted to, you know what I'm saying, get that offer.
So you're a very interesting player, Elijah, because like I could project you, I think, position on the next level. Like you could play some five tech, you could play on the edge, you can reduce down, play inside potentially. Because I know your body, I feel like you just keep growing, right? Like you're just naturally putting on a lot of good weight this offseason. Positionally, how many different things do you think you could do on the next level as far as playing the defensive line, like reducing down, playing on the edge? Like how do you see yourself as a player potentially long term?
I want to do three tech and play edge as well. Because I know on three tech like pass, I'm very good at pass rushing versus the guards, and edge. I'm good on edge on setting the edge and using my long arms to work a move and get to the quarterback. So both.
Yeah. So is it safe to say, and correct me if I'm wrong, do you feel like you're a player that whether it's a 3-down alignments or a 4-down system up front, as far as the number of defensive linemen you're playing, like, are you comfortable playing in both potentially at different alignments?
That's it. Any position, really. Yeah, any position.
So let me ask you, because again, I'm talking back to those training videos I've seen of you, just hitting your moves, doing all those things on the beach and all that. Talk to me about your development this offseason, because I know I saw some film of you, obviously, from this past year and a lot of great building blocks to work with, obviously. But how have you seen your game continue to develop this offseason as you've been putting in that offseason work?
Since I've been going 3 times a day working out, I feel like my skill set, my skill level is just like it's starting to be high, and yeah, that's really it. I know when I first got down to IMG, I was still developing, still learning how to do things, but now I'm getting there. I'm getting there.
So I know you're back home in Virginia right now. When do you head back to IMG and really start to hit that grind, obviously, with the team?
July 18th.
July 18th. Okay. You ready for it, man? You look
Oh
ready.
yeah. Oh yeah. Yes, sir.
I love it. Well, let me ask you, because I don't know if you are a person that like sets individual goals. Obviously, I know team goals are important, especially at a place like IMG, who all they do is win, right? But for you heading into your junior year, are there some individual goals you have? Are there some team goals? Like, what are some things that you really want to accomplish as a junior?
30 plus tackles, 10 sacks, and that's really it. And try to get the max prep All-American first team. Yeah.
Love that. Love that. So some big goals set, obviously. And I kind of want to hit on a couple recruiting questions, then I'll end the interview here with you, Elijah, because I really appreciate your time. I want to be cognizant of your time, obviously. So as we're moving forward here, I know you said you have a couple visits set up. Is there any potential timeline that you're trying to hold to, whether that is before junior year, after junior year, going into senior year? Like, is there any type of timeline that you have kind of set for wanting to potentially make a commitment at some point?
I don't really know yet. I'm gonna keep it honest with you. I was thinking about doing it before my senior year, but I don't know when's the right time right now. I'm gonna try to do junior, maybe junior year before the season. Before the season.
Okay.
No. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Senior year before the season start. Before the season.
Okay.
So
So probably the spring or summer leading up to your senior year is kind of
Yes,
the rough timeline you want to abide by. Cool. And then my last question for you is, obviously I know that decision is pretty far into the future, but if you could just kind of list maybe a couple of things that are important for you, like what are you looking for in a school, whether that's academically, athletically, like what are you trying to find in a perfect potential fit?
I'm looking for like my relationships with the coaches is key. Also, how are they going to be using me on the field? Am I going to be getting reps as a freshman? Is the academic program high? Is it going to help me after life, after college, to give me any job I want? And that's really it. Yeah, and the atmosphere, the environment around me.
Well, and then I guess a follow-up question would be just from whether it's Notre Dame, somebody else on your offer list, or someone that hasn't even offered you yet to end up with you in their 2026 class. What are they getting in Elijah Gold, man? Like, boast about yourself for a second. Like, what are you bringing to the table potentially? This could be player perspective. It could be personal. Like, who are they getting in Elijah Gold?
You said it, Elijah Golden. That's what they're getting. They're getting the hard worker. They're getting everything. It's like a big package is what they're getting.
Love it, man.
Golden
I
deal.
love it.
That's
I
it.
love it so much. And again, joined by one of the top defensive linemen in the 2026 recruiting class, Elijah Golden out of Bradenton, Florida, IMG Academy, top 20 overall player in the 2026 class, according to 247 Sports. Elijah, I appreciate you so much, man. We'll definitely have to have you back on again, but thank you so much for your time today, brother.
Thank you.
So, Ryan, that was your interview with Elijah Golden.
Yep.
I'm going to end there, Ryan. Just some thoughts on him as a player. Just obviously, it's very early in his recruitment. Notre Dame is getting on a kid that they see potential with, and if you're going to have a shot with an IMG kid like that, you're going to have to get on him soon. So, I actually like the offer and I like the push. What are your thoughts on Elijah and just kind of Notre Dame would seem like they're a school with a very legitimate opportunity, although as you said in the interview, it's way early with him.
Well, I mean, I think the early nature of it is obviously important to the timeline and he obviously spoke about something before his senior year, after junior season. So this isn't something that's in a rush decision right now, but you have to like Notre Dame's chances early. I mean, they're a school that he's been out to twice already this offseason, right? So obviously there was some clear interest there. I think that Notre Dame has done a good job of evaluating him early, because when they offered him, I think he only had like one or two offers at that point. His offer list is blowing up because he's now 6'4", over 270 pounds. He's been on the camp circuit a little bit. He's been training out in the state of Virginia. He's down in IMG. And I think Notre Dame is hoping, and I think they are expecting a big breakout as a junior. And I know that Elijah obviously is expecting that of himself as a junior as well at IMG.
I mean, you can see the tools, Ryan. He's a very much a work in progress, but you can see some tools to work with. There's no question about it. He's a talented player. And look, Notre Dame is trying to have a little bit more success in IMG right now than they have in the last few years. So hopefully they'll be able to keep that going. So Ryan, great stuff, man. Very good interview with Elijah. And fun show today. Very fun show today. A lot of interesting things going on. For any further recruiting news and scoop, we'll always have some. We're going to try to get some up here later today, just about kind of where things are right now from an intel standpoint. So you're going to want to check that out at boards.irishbreakdown.com, folks. I tell you guys this all the time, and I mean it. If you are not on the board, you are missing out. Great value, great community, tons of conversation, lots of scoop. We have a very, very busy summer planned for you. So for Ryan and Sean, I'm Bryan. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Really appreciate you all being with us, and we will talk to you again very soon on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.